Chapter 607. Wuming didn't do anything else as he stretched out his hand and started chanting. Thou hast violated the contract and brought sin to the world. Lord's day, sinners shall be punished. Crush their backs, dig out their tendons, bones, hair, and brains, and trample on their blood and mud. If I am the one who cannot approach the darkness, I will follow the words of the Lord and destroy thee. The moment he finished chanting, the holy light came into contact with Wuming. Mr. Villo? Black Rabbit panicked and her hair turned pink. But in the next second, everyone, including Black Rabbit, calmed down. The holy light stopped at Wuming's position. No, it should be said that the moment the holy light came into contact with Wuming's position, it disappeared for some reason. Moments later, the torrential waves of light disappeared. Everyone saw countless streams of light flowing into Wuming's palm, and in the middle of Wuming's palm was a pitch-black hole. The light of the fake holy sword was swallowed by it. Although he was also very curious about this, the most important thing for now was that Wuming was fine. Phew! Laetitia took a deep breath. Although Laetitia looked like she had victory in her hands, she was actually more afraid than anything else. After all, the relationship between two people changed not only on the surface, but also on a deeper level. Laetitia looked deeply at Wuming and said softly in a voice that only she could hear. My master, you're really amazing. So amazing that it's mesmerizing. In short, Wuming's action made everyone and Jiao Fei sigh in relief. At this moment, Jiao Fei, who was relieved, suddenly realized that her body had become weak. She didn't pay attention and fell backward. Unlike 16 knights and Hurai Biao, whose blessings increased their physical strength, Jiao Fei's blessings didn't increase her physical strength at all. In other words, Jiao Fei was just a normal person. On the other hand, if an ordinary person were to fall to the ground and injure the back of his head, the consequences would be unimaginable. Even if it didn't hurt the back of the head, for an ordinary person, falling backward would still hurt their back. Feeling the sudden loss of strength in his body, Jiuan Bird helplessly closed his eyes in fear, waiting for the pain from the ground. But after waiting for a while, Distant Bird realized that it didn't feel any pain. On the contrary, it felt like it had fallen into a very warm embrace. In the next second, Jiuan Flying Bird opened its eyes. Miss, I said I won't let you get hurt. Wuming teased. That's a very gentlemanly way of doing things. I'll give you an extra point. I'll even overlook your rudeness of carrying a lady in your arms, Jiao Fei Niao retorted in response to Wuming's teasing. Then, Jiao Fei Bird looked around and realized that it wasn't Wuming who had come to her side. Instead, she had come to Wuming's side. There was a purplish-black ripple where she was standing. At this moment, there was also a purplish-black ripple above her head, which was where Wuming was. Ah, is this a teleportation gate? That's interesting. Jiao Fei Niao revealed an interested smile. This was Jiuan Flying Bird's evaluation after experiencing the teleportation gate personally. Wuming had forgotten that no matter how much of a missy Jiuan Flying Bird was, a problem child was still a problem child. After escaping from danger, the problem child's nature was revealed. Shaking his head, Wuming stopped carrying Jiuan Flying Bird. Instead, he placed Jiuan Flying Bird, who seemed to be fine, on the ground. Then, Wuming waved his hand and cancelled the teleportation gate. Then, Wuming looked at Jiuan Flying Bird. How are you? Is your body okay? Wuming asked. Thank you for your concern. Although I still feel a little uncomfortable, I'm basically fine. After moving her body, Jiuan Flying Bird replied to Wuming in a very ladylike manner. Wuming guessed that Jiuan Flying Bird's sudden lack of strength was the aftereffect of using gift overload. After all, Jiuan Flying Bird's gift had not been used much. It was only used on people who were not very strong. This time, it was used directly on the Holy Sword. It was a rather intense operation. Jiuan Flying Bird might not be used to it. Still, even if it was a fake Holy Sword, it was still a Holy Sword. Even if Jiuan Flying Bird had one of the strongest gifts of humans, she could not use the fake Holy Sword that Wuming made without any aftereffects. It was like playing a game. If you completed a rare quest and obtained a rare class, but that class was only level 1. You could not equip the class's level 100 equipment, not even the fake level 50 equipment. Miss Flying Bird! Mr. Villo! Are you guys okay? Black Rabbit shouted as he ran. His face was full of panic. Renhee Lily was following behind him. We're fine, Black Rabbit. Jiyuan Flying Bird shook her head, telling him not to worry. What? That was so scary. First, Mr. Villo was almost killed. Then Miss Flying Bird fainted. It was too dangerous. Black Rabbit looked extremely frightened. However, Black Rabbit's words made Wu Ming and Jiyuan Flying Bird raise their eyebrows. Black Rabbit, what do you mean? I'm super strong. What do you mean by almost killed? And me? What do you mean by fainted? I'm still awake, okay? Wu Ming and Jiyuan Flying Bird said. Both of them grabbed Black Rabbit's rabbit ears and started to ravage them. What? Mr. Villo. Miss Flying Bird, let go of me. Black Rabbit instantly became teary-eyed. Wu Ming and Fei Niao looked at each other, smiled, and said in unison. This is your punishment. What? You two problem children. Letitia, who was slowly walking over with 16 Knights and Haruhai Yayoi, looked helplessly at Wu Ming and Flying Bird bullying Black Rabbit. She did not know what to say. She could only say that Black Rabbit was too cute. Sometimes, even she wanted to bully Black Rabbit. However, no matter what, Letitia would still take care of Black Rabbit. Therefore, Letitia quickly ended Black Rabbit's suffering. Master, after experiencing it personally, did you discover anything new about Miss Flying Bird's gift? Letitia asked. Everyone, including Wu Ming and Flying Bird, came back to their senses. That's right. Everyone's initial goal was to study Jiyuan Flying Bird's gift. Now, everyone was admiring Wu Ming and Jiyuan Flying Bird bullying Black Rabbit. Of course, there's a new discovery. Wu Ming calmly released the rabbit ears that were almost 1 meter long. By the way, Black Rabbit almost cried when it bounced back. I discovered that Flying Bird's gift is not to control, but to give. Chapter 608. Bestowal? Everyone was confused. Yes. Wu Ming nodded. Originally, when Flying Bird controlled the holy sword I made, I didn't see anything. However, when I realized that the control was only temporary, I began to doubt Flying Bird's bestowal. No one said anything. They all looked at Wu Ming, waiting for Wu Ming to continue. And after taking Flying Bird's attack, I was completely sure of Flying Bird's bestowal. Excuse me, could it be that you judged it from the power of that holy sword? 16 Knights raised his hand and asked. At that moment, the problem children, including 16 Knights, didn't cause any trouble. They hid their nature as problem children. Naturally, I know the power of the fake holy sword that I created. Coincidentally, I also have a good understanding of the power of the real holy sword. The holy sword true name liberation that Fei Niao used just now was comparable to the power of the real holy sword. After Wu Ming finished speaking, he felt that his words weren't accurate enough. He shook his head. Although I can see that, I don't have the real holy sword. Therefore, I can't prove it to you. How about this? As Wu Ming said that, he snapped his fingers. A silver holy sword that was different from the Excalibur appeared in Wu Ming's hand. With this holy sword, I can prove it to you. This made 16 Knights smile with interest. So that means you have the real holy sword. Wu Ming shrugged. He didn't answer with words. Instead, he answered with actions. Suddenly, a golden ripple appeared beside Wu Ming, and a silver-white holy sword appeared from it. The silver holy sword emitted a powerful and ancient aura. At first glance, one could tell that it was the so-called Godhead equipment in the box court world. The sword in Jiu Yufei's hand was exactly the same as the holy sword Wu Ming made. It just lacked the powerful and ancient aura. Flying Bird, is your body okay? Wu Ming asked Jiu Distant Flying Bird. No problem. I just wasn't used to it just now. I'm fine now. Jiu Bird was like a proud cat as he raised his head. Well then, I'll leave this to you. Wu Ming handed the fake holy sword to Jiu Far Flying Bird. After Jiu Flying Bird took it, Wu Ming pulled out the holy sword that was embedded in the golden ripples in the air. Fei Niao, try using your grace on this fake holy sword in your hand. Later, I will synchronize with you and use this real holy sword. Although he couldn't understand Wu Ming's actions, it was probably to prove Wu Ming's conjecture. Zhuyuan Flying Bird nodded and raised the silver sacred sword. Then, Zhuyuan Flying Bird looked at the sacred sword in Wu Ming's hand. What is this child's real name? Wu Ming smiled. He was quite happy that Zhuyuan Flying Bird called his sacred sword a child. He stroked the blade of the genuine X-Silver sword in his hand. This child's real name is X-Silver. He has been with me for a long time. Zhuyuan Flying Bird didn't know if the sacred sword had a mind of its own. When Wu Ming stroked the body of the sword, the sacred sword trembled slightly as if it was very happy. Understood. Zhuyuan Flying Bird smiled. After Zhuyuan Flying Bird said, understood, other than Letitia who was standing behind Wu Ming, the rest of the no-name, including 16 Knights and Haruhito Masaki, quickly retreated 5 meters away from Zhuyuan Flying Bird. What are you guys doing? Putting down the sacred sword, Zhuyuan Flying Bird turned around and looked at the people who were not too far away. She instantly became speechless. We have no choice, Miss Flying Bird. We have seen the power of the sacred sword just now. It seems very dangerous. It is indeed better to stay a little further away. Black Rabbit smiled embarrassedly as he replied to Zhuyuan Flying Bird's ridicule. Moreover, Mr. Villo is preparing to use the real sacred sword, True Liberation. We have to be careful. Ren touched the back of his head embarrassedly. That's right. Lily also nodded embarrassedly. Wu Ming didn't know whether to laugh or cry. However, he couldn't blame them. After all, Excalibur's noble phantasm wasn't weak, and X-Silver, which was also known as the Holy Sword, naturally wasn't weak either. It wasn't surprising that Wu Ming was able to scare everyone with it. But, what about you, 16th Knight? Don't tell me you're scared too? Wu Ming looked at Reverse 16 Knights who was standing in front of Black Rabbit, Ren, and the others. Wu Ming heard that in the gift competition where the prize was Letitia, Reverse 16 Knights was the one who broke the other's gift with his bare hands. Although the true liberation of the sacred sword was not weak, Wu Ming didn't think that the true liberation of the sacred sword would have any effect on Reverse 16 Knights when he was up against such a crazy person. Perhaps, with just one punch, the sacred sword's light cannon would be destroyed. Why would I be afraid? It's just that I think it's a little troublesome. I'm the one who hates troublesome things the most. 16 Knights spread out his hands with a smile on his face as he answered Wu Ming helplessly. However, in Wu Ming's opinion, Reverse 16 Knights liked to look for trouble, and also liked to create trouble. He didn't seem to be afraid of trouble at all. Ignoring Reverse 16 Knights for the time being, Wu Ming looked at Harai Masaaki who was beside Reverse 16 Knights. What about you, Masaaki? Are you afraid of trouble too? As a fake girl, Harai Masaaki tilted her little head. I'm not afraid of trouble, but they all retreated, so I'll go with them. An extremely calm voice entered Wu Ming's ears, making Wu Ming feel like he was defeated. This made Wu Ming want to say, this time, you won't be completely liberated. There won't be any danger. Please don't worry. Forget it. Wu Ming didn't care about them anymore. Ignore them, Flying Bird. Let's begin. After greeting Flying Bird, Wu Ming and Geofar Flying Bird raised their sacred swords above their heads. X-Silver. X-Silver. Two completely different true name liberation were chanted by Wu Ming and Geofar Flying Bird. In an instant, the two silver-white sacred swords gathered a bright silver light. At the same time, the people who were hiding 5 meters behind Wu Ming and Geofar Flying Bird retreated even further. Little brother, be careful not to misfire. Reverse 16 Knights didn't forget to tease Wu Ming. Wu Ming turned around and looked at Reverse 16 Knights helplessly. Geofar Flying Bird's attention was on the two sacred swords. Two silver-white lights with the same scale of energy were hidden and covered the silver sacred swords, just like the Excalibur from before. However, looking at the two sacred swords that were emitting the same power, Geofar Flying Bird seemed to have understood something. Chapter 609. After that, Wu Ming spoke to Zhuyuan Flying Bird, who was in deep thought. That's fine, Flying Bird. Don't we need to release it? Zhuyuan Flying Bird was confused. There's no need for that. After all, We still need to use No Name's land when it regains its vitality. It's not good to destroy this piece of land like this. Juyuan Flying Bird was a little embarrassed. She naturally knew what Wu Ming was talking about. Even though Excalibur's attack wasn't aimed at No Name's house, it still managed to plow a large piece of wasteland around No Name. Moreover, it was a very fierce one. Rather than plowing, it would be more accurate to say that they had dug. Moreover, what Wu Ming said was right. After all, they still needed to use the land in the future. It was not good to destroy the land like this. Then that's fine. Juyuan Flying Bird nodded with a little regret. Juyuan Flying Bird actually liked the feeling of releasing the holy sword. After all, it was a light cannon. It was so exciting and she had released it herself. Therefore, it was understandable that Juyuan Flying Bird wanted to do it again. Wu Ming didn't notice Juyuan Flying Bird's slightly regretful expression. He turned his head and immediately shouted to reverse 16 Knights and the others. It's fine. Everyone come over. Seeing that there was no danger, everyone stopped hiding. Instead, they walked over to Wu Ming and Juyuan Flying Bird's side. But it's already very beautiful from afar. Now that it's closer, it's even more beautiful. Little fox girl Lily curiously looked at the holy sword in Wu Ming and Juyuan Flying Bird's hands. Actually, it's even better at night. Wu Ming freed one of his hands and patted Lily's little head. Lily's tail wagged as she enjoyed Wu Ming's touch. After patting little fox girl's head, Wu Ming looked at everyone. Does anyone see anything special about it? Wu Ming asked. Let me ask you a question. How is the quality of this fake holy sword? Juyuan Flying Bird, who was holding the fake holy sword with both hands, asked. Her strength had not yet reached the level where she could lift the charging holy sword with one hand. It's a sacred sword that I casually created. It's an existence that will break upon contact with a slightly stronger weapon. After hearing Wu Ming's words, Distant Bird revealed an I understand smile. However, 16 Knights had already seen through everything. It's a godhead, isn't it? 16 Knights crossed his arms and smiled. Godhead? Black Rabbit was stunned. He did not understand how this had anything to do with godhood. At this moment, Letitia, who was standing behind Wu Ming, also spoke. Is that so? I understand now. Letitia only pondered for a moment before she quickly understood. She was like Juyuan Fei Niao watching from the side. Not to mention, Letitia only needed to observe and did not need to be distracted at all. It was not strange that she could understand the principles so quickly. At the same time, Huribu Yaichi also nodded. So that's how it is. That's why the fake sacred sword in Fei Niao's hand is as powerful as the real one. Huribu Yaichi was also very smart. 16 Knights had already told her the answer. How could she not understand the principle behind it? What kind of profound question is everyone talking about? Don't leave Black Rabbit alone. Black Rabbit was irritated because he could not understand what Wu Ming and the others were talking about. However, Black Rabbit had indirectly forgotten about Renhua Lily. He did not know what Wu Ming and the others were talking about. 16 Knights, Distant Bird, and Haruhibu Yaichi looked at each other, smiled, and showed an expression of problem children. Then the three spoke in unison. Be our maid and we'll tell you. 3-inch don't even think about it, you problem children? As if protecting his virginity that was about to be lost, Black Rabbit protected his body and took 2 steps back. Okay, everyone stop teasing Black Rabbit. Letitia came out to mediate. Okay, you're teasing Black Rabbit again? Black Rabbit's face froze, and then roared at the 3 problem children angrily. How could that be? Black Rabbit, we really do want to take you in as a maid. 16 Knights Reversal responded to Black Rabbit with a smile. Black Rabbit snorted and ignored the problem children. Instead, she looked at Wu Ming. Mr. Villo, tell Black Rabbit what's going on. Looking at Black Rabbit, who was already very pitiful, Wu Ming did not have the intention to tease her. In fact, it's already very obvious. I deliberately used a little magic to create a fake sacred sword. The result is that the fake sacred sword in Fei Niao's hand can't exert the power of my real sacred sword, but it reached the power of the real one in Fei Niao's hand. With Wu Ming's explanation and the divinity that 16 Knights mentioned before, Black Rabbit understood. In other words, this fake holy sword has been bestowed with a godhead. That's why it can reach the power of the real one despite its poor quality. Ren asked as if he was confirming something. That's right, that's it. Fei Niao's gift is not control. That's just a byproduct of her true ability. The true nature of Fei Niao's gift is to give the target a simulated divinity, so as to control the target of the simulated divinity. That was also why ancient flying birds, control, could even control a person's heart, just like how it dealt with Guard in the beginning. Because when the gift of the ancient flying bird was activated, Guard, who only had a 7-digit soul, became the ancient flying bird's slave in an extremely short period of time. The reason why it was a simulated divinity was because ancient flying bird could not control a target for a long time. Once this gift was not used, the simulated divinity that existed in a target's body would disappear, unless ancient flying bird continued to use her light of might on a target continuously. And the reason why ancient flying bird's gift did not work on Wu Ming was also because of this. A simulated divinity was not a real divinity, so it was not that powerful. When ancient flying bird's simulated divinity entered Wu Ming's body, Wu Ming's own strength destroyed the simulated divinity, which was a foreign object, so ancient flying bird's control naturally could not be done. However, the ability to give a simulated divinity to a target is already very powerful. No wonder Lord White Yaksha said that flying bird's gift is also one of the strongest gifts of humans. Black Rabbit smiled and looked at ancient flying bird. It must be known that only certain special existences could give divinity. It was not something that any random god could do. And ancient flying bird could give a target divinity with a mere human body, which was already very heaven-defying. And whether it was divinity or simulated divinity, there was not much difference to ancient flying bird. When she was powerful, the simulated divinity would naturally be the same as the divinity. Black Rabbit had a simulated divinity weapon, which was no different from the real one, because it was bestowed by the powerful Sakra. Seeing Black Rabbit's smiling face, Wu Ming mercilessly dealt a blow. That being said, flying bird's gift has a drawback. Chapter 610. Drawback? Black Rabbit was confused. What kind of drawback could there be to giving someone a simulated divinity? Could it be that they would become problematic children? That was indeed a big drawback. Black Rabbit's imagination ran wild. Is there a drawback to my gift? Jiu Yufei asked with concern. After all, this was related to her future growth. She had to be concerned. Let's try to guess. Wu Ming was not in a hurry to answer. Instead, he let everyone guess. 16 Knights closed his eyes and thought. He recalled the scenes from before and thought of one thing. I'm afraid that Miss Gift would cause the person who was given the simulated divinity to be damaged. 16 Knights opened his eyes and looked at the silver holy sword in Jiu Yufei's hand that was still absorbing light. Then, the fake holy sword in Jiu Yufei's hand seemed to have reached its limit. Without any warning, it exploded like fireworks. Wu Ming waved his hand when the holy sword exploded. The black hole formed by annihilation covered the position of the holy sword in Jiu Yufei's hand and absorbed the energy at an extremely fast speed. Then, the black hole disappeared. The remaining magic particles of the fake holy sword floated in the air for a while before disappearing completely. The explosion of the holy sword had frightened Black Rabbit and Lily. They were afraid that the explosion of the holy sword would cause the energy inside to leak out. The result was good. The fake holy sword that was given a simulated divinity by Jiu Yufei, along with the energy that it absorbed from the atmosphere, was directly devoured by Wu Ming's annihilation. The last bit of it turned into magic particles and completely disappeared. Because Wu Ming used annihilation in time, Jiu Yufei was not hurt. However, even though he wasn't injured, he was still shocked and took a few steps back. After all, it was the thing in her hand that exploded. How could it not be scary? 16 Knights is right. Flying bird's gift seems to cause a huge loss to the person it is given to. Just like the fake holy sword just now. Although it was raised to the same level as the real holy sword because of the divinity, the price was the lifespan issue. That's why the fake holy sword exploded, right? Jiao Fei Bird said knowingly. This was also the reason why the first fake Excalibur had exploded. At that time, Flying Bird gave the order to stop. That holy sword was also casually created by Wu Ming. It was already very good that it could release the noble phantasm once. If Flying Bird gave the same order again, it would be considered light if it directly exploded. In any case, the accumulated energy within the sacred sword had been released. If it hadn't been released, Jiao Yuan Fei Bird, who had the body of an ordinary person, might have died on the spot. So, if Flying Bird wants to fully utilize the power of its gift, there are only two ways. Wu Ming extended 2 fingers. First, simulate the bestowal of a godhead and use it accordingly. After all, as long as he could find a powerful boon that could withstand the ancient Flying Bird's boon, he wouldn't have to worry about the extreme method of having the boon sacrifice its lifespan to increase its power. As for the second point, 16 Knight spoke. The second point is to prepare a large number of normal boons for Milady. Each of them can be used as a one-time boon, right? 16 Knight smiled. But that means... Letitia and Black Rabbit said in unison and then paused. Milady Flying Bird's boon actually... Lily Renoir continued Letitia and Black Rabbit's words and paused at the end. It's a very expensive boon. Haruhito Hikari, who was a pseudo 3-nothings, said the last thing. However, Jiao Yuan Fei Bird was dumbfounded. One should know that she, Jiao Yuan Fei Bird, was tired of the status and money in her world, so she abandoned everything and came here. But now, she was told that if she wanted to have fun in this game called Hakata World, she would have to pay for it. In other words, Jiao Yuan Fei Bird, who had abandoned her wealth, had to start working for money. Haha, congratulations, milady. You can return to the time when you were rich. Although she had to earn money herself. 16 Knights laughed mercilessly as a bad friend. But this was the truth, and even Jiao Yuan Fei Bird had nothing to say. Well, since Mr. Villo lent us a lot of money, we can take a part of it to prepare some boons for Milady Flying Bird. After all, boons that could withstand the power of Jiao Yuan Fei Bird's simulated divinity were very rare, so they could only choose the second path. Actually, if Flying Bird needs it, I can create some powerful boons for you. After all, Wu Ming's create green item was not like projection magic, which could only last for a while. Wu Ming could make the item last forever, but it would take some effort. After all, it was very easy for a weak item to reach this stage, but it was very difficult for a powerful item to reach this stage. That was also why Wu Ming did not create a pseudo-sky lock that could last forever. Instead, he created a time-limited item that needed to be maintained by injecting mana regularly. This was because creating pseudo-sky locks that wouldn't disappear was very troublesome. Moreover, the wear and tear during battle made the loss outweigh the gains. It would be better to create pseudo-sky locks that would disappear and inject mana into them periodically. By the way, there was only one pseudo-sky lock left in Wu Ming's relic space. The rest were tied to the American singularity Hercules and sunk into the lake with Hercules. However, it did not matter even if all of them were gone, such a time-limited sky lock was easy to create. There's no need. Jiao Yuan Fei Bird successfully resisted Wu Ming's temptation. Jiao Yuan Fei Bird, won't trouble you guys. For the time being, I'll replace it with a normal boon. I'll think of a way to create a powerful boon myself. After all, it was a problem. Cough for a proud person, even if they were her companions, Jiao Yuan Fei Bird would not accept charity. Everyone looked at each other. Facing Jiao Yuan Fei Bird's stubbornness, they could only follow her wishes. Since that's the case, why don't you accept some of my toys? Wu Ming smiled and snapped his fingers. A few holy swords fell to the ground. I told you, I don't need your help. Jiao Yuan Fei Bird crossed her arms in front of her chest and rejected Wu Ming. However, Wu Ming shook his head. You can't say that. What you need are consumable blessings. My sacred swords are also consumable blessings. What's the difference between them? He picked up a holy sword and waved it in front of Jiao Yuan Fei Bird. Since you need a trump card or something like that, these holy swords can be treated as such. However, Wu Ming's words did not move Jiao Yuan Fei Bird. although Wu Ming's words were reasonable. Moreover, I promise to protect you from harm. If you encounter any danger while I'm not by your side, these holy swords can be treated as my protection. Jiao Yuan Fei Bird started to think about the promise. Why does it sound so much like a confession? Black Rabbit complained embarrassedly. Then, Black Rabbit was glared at by Wu Ming and Jiao Yuan Fei Bird. If that's the case, I'll take a few. Jiao Yuan Fei Bird said as she took out her boon card and placed a few of the holy swords on the ground into it. Wu Ming smiled. After all, for a young lady like her, using a promise was more effective. Chapter 611. After Wu Ming's effort, the problem of the distant flying bird was finally solved. After that, Wu Ming prepared to solve the problem of the land. After all, when Letitia persuaded Wu Ming to go out for a walk, Wu Ming didn't think about the problem of Flying Bird's gift. Instead, he wanted to see if he could solve the problem of No Name's land. After all, it wasn't a good idea to leave it abandoned. However, he couldn't tell Flying Bird about this. Otherwise, with her problematic temper, she would definitely cause a ruckus. After that, Wu Ming suggested that they try to restore the vitality of the land. This made Black Rabbit, Ren, and the other no-name members pleasantly surprised. After all, when 16 Knights and the other two joined No Name, the land had already lost its vitality. They, who had never seen No Name's land with vitality, naturally didn't have any expectations. This was like a person who had seen a beautiful scenery and wanted to bring you to see it again. He might be looking forward to it since he had never seen it before. However, if you hadn't seen it before, you wouldn't be able to imagine how beautiful it was. The two were the same. However, humans were such animals. It wasn't that 16 Knights and the other two were cold-blooded and heartless. They were also very concerned about No Name's land being able to restore vitality. After all, this was their home. Mr. Villo, do you have a way to restore the vitality of our land? Black Rabbit's rabbit ears shook as he looked forward to it. If the land can be restored, then we can grow our own vegetables. The little fox girl Lily, who belonged to the logistics team, happily wagged her tail. Although they now had the water tree sapling that Wu Ming and 16 Knights obtained from defeating the water god to provide water, the other ingredients still had to be bought. Although No Name wasn't lacking in money now, generally speaking, larger communities would have their own vegetable gardens and the like. Being self-reliant was not a problem. Just like a country couldn't always rely on foreign imports. If they could rely on themselves, it was better to rely on themselves. Moreover, they should save as much as they could. After all, this money was borrowed from Wu Ming. I'm just giving it a try. I don't dare to boast that I can really restore life to the land of No Name. Wu Ming smiled and shook his head. After all, if you asked Wu Ming to fight, he would absolutely have no objection. But if you asked him to be a doctor or treat an illness, it would be a bit difficult. It wasn't that there weren't any methods to treat it, but Wu Ming hadn't tried treating the soil, so he didn't dare to boast. But he had to give it a try. Everyone had their first time. All in all, Wu Ming went to the land that Long Far Flying Bird had destroyed with the fake holy sword. He started to restore the life force of the land and the land that Long Far Flying Bird had destroyed. After all, although the land was barren, at least it was still flat and didn't look messy. On the other hand, after Jiao Yufei's holy sword had reclaimed the land, not to mention the huge ravine, there were also some serious bumps. Therefore, Wu Ming decided to take the lead and conduct an experiment on the seemingly messy land to see if he could restore the vitality of the land. If it didn't work, he could also restore the land on this side, right? Everyone stood behind Wu Ming, while Wu Ming stood beside the huge ravine. Then I'll begin, Wu Ming said as he knelt on the ground with one knee. First, a golden ripple suddenly appeared beside Wu Ming. Then, Wu Ming took out a few exquisite glass bottles that contained dark red potions. These were the healing potions from the Yggdrasil game world. Wu Ming opened the exquisite glass bottle and poured the red potion into the ravine. Then, Wu Ming poured all the healing potions he had taken out into the ravine. The red healing potions quickly seeped into the land. Black Rabbit and the others behind Wu Ming watched Wu Ming's series of actions with eyes full of doubt. They really didn't know what the healing potions were, But could it be that by pouring a few bottles of potions, the land that had been abandoned for 3 years after being attacked by the Demon King could be restored? The answer was of course impossible. At least the few of them felt that it was impossible. However, Wu Ming also thought so. Therefore, Wu Ming began the next step. Chanting the spirit language. A person with the supreme power of protection, the gods protect him, the demons hate him, 10,000 enemies can't get close to him, like a fountain of vitality that constantly surges, granting the world equal protection. The magical spirit language came out from Wu Ming's mouth. In just a moment, Black Rabbit and the others felt that Wu Ming's body began to glow, and it was accompanied by the breath of life. That was normal. Wu Ming's vitality, one of the 12 incarnations, was like a never-ending fountain. Vitality gave Wu Ming endless vitality, recovery, and all kinds of resistance. Usually, this ability was used on Wu Ming passively, but the passive effect was not obvious. However, it was still of great help to Wu Ming. This was also the reason why Wu Ming recovered so quickly after being injured by the explosion of the black mud. Having a high HP was not scary, having a high defense was not scary, but being able to recover HP was scary. After flying for half a day, his HP was restored in less than half a day. If Gideon knew about this, he would definitely vomit blood. And if Wu Ming didn't guess wrong, Gideon didn't seem to have any recovery skills. Therefore, as long as Wu Ming found his main body and fully activated his vitality incarnation, he would be able to catch Gideon off guard and directly attack the root of the problem. Facts proved that the current Wu Ming was not unable to defeat Gideon. Being able to make Gideon summon the black mud to self-destruct was the best proof. Cough cough. In short, the vitality incarnation gave Wu Ming endless vitality. Wu Ming was ready to use the healing potion as a catalyst to transfer vitality to this land. There was no limit to authority and so on. As long as one was still alive, as long as one worked hard to develop one's ability, nothing was impossible. The ancient flying bird was a good example. It went from being controlled to being given. And Wu Ming's vitality incarnation, no one said that it could not be transferred out. Although he had never tried it before, Wu Ming wanted to give it a try today. Then, Wu Ming placed one hand on the edge of the gully and closed his eyes. Then, Wu Ming's endless vitality followed Wu Ming's arm to the swollen land and came in contact with the healing potion that had been integrated into the land. Then, Wu Ming's mouth moved. Release life. In an instant, an invisible pressure was released with Wu Ming as the center, and a huge amount of vitality emerged. Chapter 6:12. Countless breaths of life emerged, and the invisible aura spread in all directions. Although it was invisible, it could still affect the surroundings. The aura impacted 16 knights and the others. Ren, Lily, and the others who were weaker couldn't adapt and couldn't help but retreat. Seeing this, 16 knights and Letitia, who were the strongest, stood in front of everyone and blocked the aura. Retroactive 16 Knights' uniform fluttered in the wind. Ignoring her messy blonde hair, Retroactive 16 Knights smiled at Wu Ming, the culprit. This is really a big scene. However, Wu Ming couldn't hear this because he found something interesting. Wu Ming found that his vitality avatar could restore the lifeless land of no name. No, it should be said that Wu Ming's vitality avatar alone could do it, and adding the healing potions was just icing on the cake. But that wasn't the main point. It was that Wu Ming had underestimated his authority. Wu Ming found that he could completely restore the land within the area covered by the aura. The 12 avatar authorities that were strengthened by the Great Origin, combined with the power of 2 gods and Wu Ming's own Dragon of Origin, were not weak abilities. Although many of them were not directly related to combat, their powerful effects could not be denied. At this moment, the Vitality Avatar had proven that Wu Ming's authority was not weak. No, it should be said that there were no weak authorities, only weak users. It seems that I have to take a good look at my authority, Wu Ming said to himself. Then Wu Ming looked and found that the area covered by the aura he just released was the entire area of no name. In other words, Wu Ming could completely restore the lifeless land of no name to its perfect state. Let's do it. Wu Ming nodded without hesitation and put his other hand on the ground. 16 knights and the others instantly felt the ground shaking. What's going on? Is it an earthquake? Black Rabbit was shocked and subconsciously protected the arm of Haruhi Yaichi, who was closest to her. It's not an earthquake, it's Master's ability. Letitia answered Black Rabbit calmly. Although she couldn't fully understand her master's ability, Letitia, who had become Wu Ming's dependent, could still somewhat sense Wu Ming's ability. Just like now, the earth shaking was caused by Wu Ming's ability, and Letitia could sense it. At this time, Haruhi Yaichi, who was especially concerned about the lifeless land, suddenly spoke. Look around you. Everyone looked at the land around them. The cracked ground began to heal, and the nutrient-less sand began to disappear. The soft and weak ground began to harden, and some green grass began to grow on the ground that had no greenery at all. This is? Black Rabbit, Ren, and the others were quite shocked. Needless to say, everyone understood. It was obvious that the vitality of this land had been restored by Silent Cry. This is great. Our land is finally rejuvenated. Black Rabbit happily hugged Haruhi Yaichi, who was beside her, and jumped up and down. Even Haruhi Yaichi, who was a hypocrite, was moved by Black Rabbit's excitement, and a slight smile appeared on his face. Rin, Lily, and Letitia also had expressions of joy. After all, they had personally seen this land that was originally filled with life become barren, and now they saw this barren land filled with life again. This was the feeling of an old player. 16 Knights and Jiuyuki weren't as excited as Black Rabbit and the others, but the smiles on their faces showed that they were in a good mood. But there was a problem. Villo's land seems to have been restored a bit too much. Jiuyuki, who was carefully observing, saw that even the land near the house in No Name had been restored and slightly frowned. Immediately, 16 Knights jumped into the air, and after a short delay of a few seconds, landed on the ground. I'm afraid that little brother has restored all of No Name's abandoned land. 16 Knights, who had good eyesight, saw the surrounding scene. This isn't good. Jiuyuki said uneasily. As a young lady of a corporate aristocrat, and as a young lady from her world that had just ended World War II, her country had entered a period of recovery. Jiuyuki clearly understood the methods and rules of post-war recovery. No Name was once the largest community in the East District, and was recognized as the regional ruler by Byakuya, the class ruler. Naturally, No Name had a large piece of land. At the very least, it was an area that others would covet. But because of the Demon King's attack, such a large piece of land had completely lost its life. It had lost its name, flag, and companions. This was why the other communities didn't hit it when it was down, and they didn't even try to steal it. After all, a piece of land without life wasn't that easy to restore. Yes, the other communities wouldn't do something like that. Although there weren't many people in No Name who didn't experience the Demon King's attack, it wasn't that small either. At the very least, it was more than enough to take care of such a large piece of land. And now, not to mention 16 Knights and the others, 95% of No Name's people were children under the age of 10. Even if the children were included, there would only be a mere 130 people. No Name's territory was very large, quite large. At the very least, it was the size of a small town. How could you let a village with 95% of its population being children under the age of 10 manage such a large piece of land? As a genius, 16 Knights Reversal naturally understood this logic. However, 16 Knights wasn't worried about this. Little brother has indeed gone a bit overboard, but I think he should have a way to solve it. 16 Knights held the back of his head with both hands as he looked at Wu Ming, who had finished restoring the land. He stood up and walked over to them. It's done. Wu Ming smiled and waved at everyone. But as the leader, Rin stood up. Mr. Villo, isn't it a bit too much to directly restore all of No Name's land? Rin smiled awkwardly. After all, he had good intentions. Although it wasn't to the point of questioning him, this kind of question made the shy youth feel embarrassed. Don't tell us you didn't think of this, or I'll look down on you. Jiu Yuanfei, who was slightly closer to Wu Ming, said ruthlessly. But Wu Ming didn't disappoint them. How could I not think of this? Of course, I have a way. Chapter 613. Wu-ming wasn't a careless person, he did it on purpose. But, Mr. Villo, we don't have enough people. Black Rabbit's ears drooped, looking regretful. Looks like we can only rent out the extra land to earn money. Black Rabbit said helplessly. Why was she helpless? Although Black Rabbit wasn't wrong, this was still the main base of No Name. How could they rent out the main base of the community to earn money? After all, the community was comparable to a country, and as a member of the country, they had a collective sense of honor. This was also why Black Rabbit was helpless, because she didn't want outsiders to enter her and her companions' home. But why would Black Rabbit still consider renting out the land even though she was helpless? Although No Name wasn't short on money, the money was still borrowed from Wu-ming. Although Wu-ming didn't have a deadline, Ren and Black Rabbit had a strong sense of responsibility and believed that they couldn't be too much of a default on Wu-ming's debt. Therefore, they were still making money by principle. Plus, it was really a waste of a large piece of land like No Name. It was a special time to deal with it, so they could only endure the humiliation. That's the only way. Ren also nodded helplessly, agreeing with Black Rabbit's opinion. However, this made Wu-ming dumbfounded. I say, Black Rabbit, Ren, are you two listening to me properly? Wu-ming didn't know whether to laugh or cry as he helplessly flicked Ren and Black Rabbit's heads, causing them to cry out in pain. Didn't I say I have a way? Before, when Wu-ming borrowed money to No Name, now it was the same with the land issue. Why did these two always listen to Wu-ming's words? During the borrowing incident, Wu-ming had also said that it was a donation of No Name. However, Black Rabbit, Ren, and even the children who were slightly older than Lily insisted on treating the money as a loan. So be it. Wu-ming didn't want to take it back anyway, so he gave her an indefinite period of time. However, Black Rabbit and Ren had the idea that they had to return the money as soon as possible. They started their money-making plan. Although it wasn't as tiring as before, it still wasn't easy. This time was the same. Wu-ming said that he had a way, but these two guys ignored him. This made Wu-ming not know whether to laugh or cry. How can we allow outsiders to use our No Name base's land? You have to follow your heart, Black Rabbit. Don't forget your original intention. This sentence was not a joke. Black Rabbit's original intention of inviting Wu-ming was to protect her family's home. It could not change because of this. But, Mr. Villo, we really don't have enough manpower. Black Rabbit rubbed his aching forehead with an innocent expression. What a little idiot. Wu-ming smiled helplessly, then gave Black Rabbit's head another smack. Wah dash. Because he hit the same place, Black Rabbit was about to cry again. However, the stick had been given, now it was time to give the carrot. You already have a backer like me. What are you afraid of? Wu-ming stroked Black Rabbit's head and smiled. After all, he was a powerhouse that White Yaksha personally admitted was not inferior to her. It could be said that with such a powerhouse joining No Name, it was only a matter of time before it rose. Then, Villo, do you have any ideas? Haruhito Hikari pulled Wu-ming's sleeve and asked curiously. Of course, the idea is to increase the number of people. Wu-ming kept them in suspense and smiled. Then, Wu-ming reached out with one hand. In an instant, a golden ripple swallowed Wu-ming's arm. It looked like Wu-ming was looking for something. I've been curious for a long time. Villo, what is this golden ripple? Black Rabbit asked with interest and puzzlement. One of my abilities. It's just ordinary personal space. Although I have the gift card, this old friend has been with me for a long time. It's still more convenient this way. After Wu-ming finished speaking, he seemed to have found what he was looking for and pulled his hand out of the golden ripple. A palm-sized stone figurine appeared in Wu-ming's hand. It looked like a stone giant, but this stone giant was slightly smaller. Stone figurine? Black Rabbit looked curiously at the palm-sized stone figurine in Wu-ming's hand and poked it twice. This is not an ordinary stone figurine. Wu-ming shook his head and moved his arm away from Black Rabbit, who was poking the figurine. This made Black Rabbit puff out his cheeks in dissatisfaction. Did you know that there is a rare stone figurine item that can summon endless demons? Wu-ming stopped playing with Black Rabbit and asked everyone. Wu-ming had such an item. It was one of the many powerful items that Demiurgos gave Wuming when Wuming left Nizhalik. A rare gift that can summon endless demons? Everyone who had never heard of such a gift muttered. If that item is used, unless the item is destroyed, the summoned demons will fill up the entire world. Endlessly summoning demons was no joke. It was a real thing. It was a game item. When game items were transformed into reality, some of their abilities were often quite terrifying. Resurrection alone was already very powerful. No matter which world it was, resurrecting life was quite difficult. Only existences like Nizhalik had the ability to resurrect without any sequelae. Or it could be said that the other world also had such an ability. Wuming learned from Sebastian that Rose Tsong's captain had the ability to resurrect. However, it seemed that the physical fitness had to meet the standard, and they had to lie in bed for a month. Even so, the native of that world had the ability to resurrect, which was enough to open Wuming's eyes. After Wuming finished speaking, Jiao Feinyao looked at the stone figurine in Wuming's hand seriously. Could it be that the one in your hand is that rare gift? Jiao Feinyao asked calmly. Of course not. Wuming shook his head. This made Black Rabbit, Ren, and the others who were slightly worried feel relieved. Although I also have that item. Then why did you say it as if you have never seen it before? Black Rabbit roared at Wuming. Ignoring Black Rabbit's roar, Wuming raised the stone figurine in his hand, or rather, it could be called the magic puppet, Graham, figurine. It seems that magic puppets are stone figurines. This is a tool that can summon an endless number of magic puppets. Chapter 614. Endless Magic Marionettes? Everyone repeated Wuming's words. You mean to let the magic marionettes work on No Name's land? 16 Knights crossed his arms in front of his chest. As one of the more intelligent members of No Name, 16 Knights easily guessed Wuming's thoughts based on the series of words he had said before. After all, there are a lot of magic marionettes, and they don't need to eat or rest. They are the perfect labor force. As he said this, Wuming looked at the magic marionette in his hand. This tool could summon endless magic marionettes of various types. Although there were no management-type magic marionettes, as long as the tool was controlled properly and recognized as the master of No Name, then even the youngest child of No Name would be able to command the magic marionettes. Moreover, this is a tool that can summon endless magic marionettes. We can also make money by selling magic marionettes. Wuming's words made Rinha Black Rabbit's eyes light up, and his expression became more cheerful. Lily also cried out happily. That's great, this way our community won't have to worry about financial resources. Although Lily looked like a little lowly, in the No Name where the average age was less than 10 years old, Lily had a lot of responsibilities. Not only did she have to prepare 3 meals a day for Wuming and the others, but she also had to lead the capable children to prepare 3 meals a day for the 120 children. Not only that, but Lily was also in charge of all kinds of daily necessities and all kinds of housework for No Name. Although the No Name's house was damaged a lot, but in these 3 years, a part of it was repaired, but this part was already big enough. Otherwise, why would there be an underground bathing area, and Wuming and the others could choose a room at will, and that was because the house was big. All in all, Lily took on a heavy responsibility that shouldn't be taken on at her age. Wuming's mind was thinking, and a light flashed in his eyes. Time to do something. Wuming's reaction was self-reflection, but Rinha Black Rabbit's reaction was different from Wuming's. Both of their expressions became gloomy. Mr. Villo, I'm really sorry for troubling you. Ren said rather embarrassedly. Immediately after, Black Rabbit also spoke in embarrassment. Young Master Ren is right. Mr. Villo obviously didn't care about the decline of No Name and joined our community. You even put in so much effort to contribute to No Name. We really don't know how to thank you. The first thing they thought of was not their own community, but their companions, members, who had sacrificed themselves for this family, community. After all, the reason why they risked their lives to protect the community was for their companions and their family. Meanwhile, this family member in front of them had made a sacrifice that would be highly appreciated by any other community for the sake of the community. Meanwhile, their community didn't have the ability to repay this family member and could only ask for more. This made the Runha Black Rabbit very upset, especially the Black Rabbit who was full of dedication as a member of the Uedu clan. However, in the face of their guilt, Wuming could not help but laugh. "What are you guys talking about?" In an instant, Wuming had a matter-of-fact look on his face. "Do I need a reward for my family? Isn't this a matter of course?" Ren, Black Rabbit, and even Lily beside them and Letitia behind Wuming were all stunned. That's right. For the sake of the family members and companions were all selfless contributions. It wasn't about how long a family member contributed, nor was it about how little other family members contributed. However, because of Wuming's strength, Ren and the others subconsciously treated Wuming as a guest of honor. This caused them to feel guilty. "I actually don't have much ambition. Even if I've experienced a lot of adventures in other worlds and defeated a lot of powerhouses, I don't think many people know me." Wuming recalled with a smile. Whether it was the world of Type Moon or other worlds, Wuming could be said to be not very famous. In the alternate world of Nizalik, Wuming was at most a kind and powerful recluse who had subordinates who were not weaker than him. At most, his reputation was only promoted by the Golden Princess in Rystich. The commoners only knew that there was a powerhouse. Furthermore, Wuming strictly forbade Nizalik from breaking ties with the outside world. Other than Sebastian, the upper echelons of the Rystich kingdom, and some special people, Wuming was only famous in Nizalik. In the world of the Godslayers, ordinary people did not know about the Godslayers at all. Even if Wuming was the last king, he was only famous in the magic circle. However, being famous was one thing. Those who knew Wuming and had seen Wuming were few. In the alternate world where they competed for the Star Cup, other than Rick's group of humans, only Shiobi and the Skywings knew him. Although other races also knew of Wuming's existence, Wuming did not know whether they had seen Wuming or not. Not only that, but other than Rick, the humans also treated him as an ordinary refugee. However, looking at Wuming's history, he was actually quite famous in a sense. In the world of the Type Moon, the powerhouses were all existences of the Root Dragon, and other worlds also had people who knew of Wuming's fame although they had not seen him before. It was just that Wuming had never thought of being famous. Wuming's original thoughts were only to become stronger and return home. Now, he had returned home and his strength had changed. His current goal was to get rid of Gidia, the hidden danger. However, that was the big goal, and Wuming's current small goal was to develop No Name first. "I'm a part of this family." Wuming smiled in return. "Mr. Villo." Black Rabbit and the others did not know what to say. In short, they were touched. Taking advantage of this opportunity, Wuming began his performance. "Also, the money I donated to No Name before, I never thought of asking you to return it." Wuming looked at Ran and Black Rabbit with a look of negotiation. "Why don't we just forget about it?" Wuming said with a smile. However, Black Rabbit was the first to disagree. "How can we do that, Mr. Villo? We already said that we would borrow it. How can we go back on our words?" They always felt that Black Rabbit was the one who borrowed the money, and Wuming was the one who borrowed the money. "That's right, Mr. Villo, we must return this money." Ren also had a determined expression. Yes, do as you please." Wuming replied with a bitter smile. Sure enough, the one who owed money was the boss, and they had to listen to the boss. Seeing that Wuming's debt dispute had ended, the three problem children began to become active. Then, Black Rabbit, let's talk about our direct problem. 16 Knights of Reverse smiled at Black Rabbit with a terrifying smile. What? Black Rabbit was confused. She did not know how she offended this group of people. Of course it's because you kept talking about Villo and neglected our matter, Black Rabbit. Juyu and Fei Niao pointed out the problem. After all, the three of them continuously participated in the gift competition, which was also a great help to No Name. Not mentioning us made me unhappy. That's why Black Rabbit needs to be punished. Hirai Toshi said lightly. The Black Rabbit looked at the three problem children in shock and let out a cry of surprise. No! Chapter 6:15. Ren panicked and wanted to stop them, But he couldn't do anything as he watched the three problem children bully the black rabbit. Wu Ming, Letitia, and Lily went to the houses of No Name. Wu Ming's intention was to renovate No Name's house as well. After all, it was a bit awkward to have a bunch of broken houses on such a large piece of land. Therefore, with Ren's approval, Wu Ming followed Lily to the houses. "Master, do you know how to repair houses?" Letitia asked respectfully. But it sounded like she was doubtful. "Master, these houses don't have any life force, and many of them have already collapsed. It will be difficult to repair them." Hearing Letitia's words, Wu Ming looked at some of the collapsed houses on the outskirts of No Name's territory. No Name was once the largest community in the East District. Therefore, this piece of land that was once the largest community in the East District was naturally huge. It was impossible to only build a few houses in the center. There must be some houses in the entire territory. But because of the Demon King's attack as well as the desolation of the land, it was already very difficult for the people of No Name to repair the houses in the center. Therefore, in these 3 years, the houses in No Name's territory were basically not repaired by the people of No Name. Therefore, these houses had already collapsed. Not only that, many of the houses in the center of No Name's territory had also collapsed. As the largest community in the East District, the house in the center was actually quite big. It was not an exaggeration to say that it was a castle. Well, as a box world with many gods and Buddhas, basically every community that was slightly stronger had this kind of Western castle-style residence. The castle was connected to the outside with a huge reservoir. At this moment, the reservoir was filled with incomparably clean water. It was the water provided by defeating the water god and obtaining the water tree sapling. In the beginning, when the black rabbit placed the water tree's sapling on the small platform in the middle of the reservoir, the water that instantly covered the entire reservoir made the birds from the past excited for a while. The clean reservoir complemented the land that was full of life, but it was surrounded by castle-like houses that looked like they had been abandoned for a long time. This was an existence that was rather inconsistent with the land and the pool. Therefore, Wu Ming decided to first repair the houses here and then take care of the other houses. "Letitia, I really don't have the ability to repair houses." Looking at these castle-like houses that looked like dilapidated houses, Silent Wonder spoke to Letitia without looking back. Lily, who was listening on the side, was stunned. "So embarrassing, why did you come back if you don't have the ability to repair houses?" But Letitia was waiting for Wu Ming to continue. "But we have this." Wu Ming raised his arm, and the small golem statue appeared once again. Without saying anything, Wu Ming directly infused magic power into the stone statue. The moment the statue's eyes to Letitia, the statues to be activated. Then, a dark purple ripple appeared beside Wu Ming. It was a skill that Wu Ming often used, portal. However, this wasn't a portal. It was a passage that Wu Ming created to spawn magic puppets. You see, isn't Yggdrasil a game? Basically, all the ripples in this game are in the form of portals. They are all purplish-black ripples. Although it was a bit of a shoddy job, at least it was useful. It could spawn monsters. Suddenly, a stone pillar came out of the dark purple portal. Taking a closer look, it wasn't a stone pillar. It was clearly the leg of a magic puppet. Then, a 5-meter-tall stone giant with red eyes and a body made of hard white stone walked out and stood beside Wu Ming. Then, silent cries stopped channeling mana into the golem statue in his hand, and the purple-black ripples disappeared. Of course, it wasn't that Wu Ming didn't want to work anymore. He just wanted to see if this magic puppet could meet his requirements. "Go, repair the damaged house." Wu Ming ordered the magic puppet. Originally, monsters that were summoned by a tool that could summon unlimited monsters wouldn't listen to the summoner's orders. However, magic puppets were different. In the game Yggdrasil, they wouldn't move unless there was a master or a leader who gave the order. Normally, the magic puppet would be in a standby state. Only when a high-level magic creature or its master gave it an order would the magic puppet begin to move according to the order given. Therefore, Yggdrasil originally didn't have a tool that could summon magic puppets like this. However, after Wu Ming found out that there was a tool that could summon unlimited demons, Wu Ming created a tool that could summon magic puppets based on that tool. Well, actually, it was because Wu Ming was tired of making magic puppets one by one during the battle against Darius. Even with the help of Ain's Ergong, Wu Ming didn't have to make magic puppets one by one. That was a very troublesome thing for Wu Ming. Therefore, Wu Ming used his own grand creation item to create a modified version of the Magic Puppet Unlimited Summoning tool based on the tool that could summon unlimited demons. By controlling the amount of magic power released, one could control the number of magic puppets that could be produced. One could also choose the type of magic puppet that could be produced. Another thing was that it could be turned off or turned on at any time. The tool that could summon unlimited demons couldn't be turned off once it was started. Therefore, it was a very rare tool. Wu Ming's tool was even more cheat-like. It could be turned on or off at any time. In addition to being able to control the amount and speed of production, and choose the type of magic puppet that could be produced, this tool was comparable to a god-tier tool. If it wasn't for the fact that the magic puppets produced weren't very strong, they would be close to a world-class tool. All in all, the monsters produced by this tool could be controlled. Otherwise, Wu Ming wouldn't be at ease to give it to children. After hearing Wu Ming's words, the magic puppet immediately walked towards the house in front of it. Because of its weight, every step the magic puppet took shook the ground. If it wasn't for Wu Ming giving life to the ground and making the ground solid, the magic puppet would have probably sunk into the sand and left a footprint on the ground. In short, the magic puppet began its performance. Chapter 616. Oh, so this is the magic puppet you summoned with your item. It looks quite sturdy. I wonder if it can take a punch from me. I'm getting excited. 16 Knights, who was attracted by the magic puppet, walked to Wu Ming with her arms crossed. Please don't attack it. If you punch it, it will probably be reduced to rubble. Wu Ming looked at 16 Knights helplessly. At this time, Ku Asuka's voice came from the other side of Wu Ming. Ku Asuka patted Wu Ming's arm with excitement and curiosity. The stone giant in the fairy tale. I didn't expect to see one in the Hakata world. This is the first time I've seen one. As expected, a common monster like the stone giant would be the most familiar monster in the eyes of ordinary people. Yes, then can you stop hitting me? Wu Ming resisted powerlessly. Although he wouldn't get hurt, it didn't feel good. I didn't expect you to be so chaste. 16 Knights also looked at Ku Asuka with a mocking expression. How would a villain like you understand my interest? Ku Asuka didn't back down and replied to 16 Knights, but her eyes were still on the magic puppet. From Wu Ming's point of view, Ku Asuka didn't look like someone who was interested in fairy tales. She looked more like someone who was interested in strange creatures. This probably had something to do with Ku Asuka's era. After World War II, there probably wasn't much entertainment. This was especially true for Jiu Yuanfei, who was the young mistress of the family. She must have been extremely busy back then. Wu Ming guessed. However, Wu Ming's guess was the opposite of the truth. Ku Asuka, who had the ability to control, wasn't bothered by her responsibilities as a young lady. How is it going to repair the damaged house? Hurai Hibu asked. Since 16 Knights and Ku Asuka had lost interest in the Black Rabbit, then Hurai Hibu, who was a problem child, naturally followed along. Wu Ming looked at the Black Rabbit that was being supported by Ren with pity. He didn't know whether to laugh or cry as he shook his head. Then, Wu Ming answered Hurai Hibu's question. It naturally has its own unique method. I guarantee that it will be unexpected and reasonable. Wu Ming crossed his arms and waited for the magic puppet's performance. The magic puppet walked up to No Name, which was a huge building that looked like a castle, and slowly stopped in front of it. Because the other members of No Name had taken care of it for the past 3 years, the castle-like building only had some minor damage and color faded. However, the magic puppet didn't care how it was damaged or how badly it was damaged. It only knew that it needed to fix this place. Then, the magic puppet itself disintegrated. That's right, the stone golem had disintegrated into a pile of rubble. These rubble combined with the rubble of the collapsed walls, and under the influence of its own mana, the rubble wrapped around the castle-shaped building. In an instant, the 5-meter-tall stone giant, at the cost of losing its own body, repaired the building that looked damaged. Even the outer walls of the castle were rearranged by the stone giant's stone pieces. The missing parts were repaired, and the old parts were disintegrated by the magic puppet into fine dust. The entire outer wall was repaired by the magic puppet, and it looked like a newly built building. This is really not simple. This stone giant's limbs are developed, but its brain is quite good. Black Rabbit, who was being supported by Wu-Ming, commented on the magic puppet summoned by Wu-Ming. Seeing that she had just been played by the 3 problem children, Wu-Ming didn't want to complain about the Black Rabbit anymore. In fact, it was because Wu-Ming had given the magic puppet a command in advance. If there was a hole, it would be repaired. If there was a hole, it would be repaired. If there was a hole, it would be repaired. If there was a hole, it would be repaired. In short, as long as there was an imperfect place, the magic puppet would find it and repair it. But this way, the efficiency has increased by a lot. Ren nodded as he looked at the magic puppet's repaired wall. There wasn't the slightest gap in the wall. It looked like a natural whole piece. Every piece of broken stone was tightly entwined with the building due to the influence of mana. It didn't look like it was made up of large pieces of broken stone. But, if we use these magic puppets to repair all the buildings, won't it cause the building to collapse later? Hibu asked. Don't worry, the magic puppet's magic power will change the gaps between itself and the building it is attached to. It can fuse the two together. After a while, when the magic puppet's magic power is exhausted, it will fuse into the same material. Wu-Ming's words made everyone feel relieved. Then, let's continue, everyone. Wu-Ming wasn't talking about the no-name people, but the magic puppets. Wu-Ming began to inject magic power into the magic puppet in his hand again. This time, the amount of magic power injected was quite large. In an instant, a black and purple ripple appeared, and several 5-meter-tall figures walked out from it. It was the mass-produced version of the stone giant from the very beginning. When these stone giants came out, they each ran to the no-name houses. After the first batch of magic puppets left the ripple space, the second batch of magic puppets walked out with their hard legs, shaking the earth. In this way, Wu-Ming continued to inject magic power into the magic puppet in his hand, and the same stone giant magic puppets came out from the black and purple ripple space. Looking at the no-name territory that seemed to have become a breeding ground for stone giants, everyone didn't know what to say. Actually, when the second batch of stone giants came out, everyone was already surprised. Well, if it was back to 16 nights, Wu-Ming couldn't see whether he was surprised or not, but everyone was surprised. This was because Wu-Ming's magic puppet summoned too many stone giants, and it didn't seem to stop. These stone giants were at most 6 digits, and 5 digits was impossible. However, if there was a community with countless 6-digit stone giants, then that community would be at the top of the 6-digit stone giants. Maybe even a 5-digit stone giant could try to level up. When Wu-Ming said that he had a magic puppet that could summon an unlimited number of monsters, everyone was surprised, but they had never seen such a scene, so their surprise wasn't that high. However, after seeing such a scene, it was really shocking. There was no other way. These countless stone giants were really too spectacular. Ren thought for a moment and began to mobilize. Since it's like this, then everyone, let's do a big cleaning of the no-name today. Oh! Of course, it was Black Rabbit who shouted this. It was still very awkward in the situation where everyone was silent. However, this time it was a little better. Not only was Black Rabbit shouting, Lily was also embarrassed with her. Chapter 617. In the evening, the sun had set. The entire no-name had entered a world of darkness. Wu-Ming and the others stood in front of the brand new no-name base, full of joy and gratification as they looked at the renovated castle that looked brand new. This is great, our community finally has some semblance of what it used to be. Black Rabbit bounced around the group happily, just like a rabbit. That was indeed the case. No Name was built 3 years ago. Although it wasn't very luxurious, it still had a grand atmosphere, unlike now where the land was abandoned and the buildings were damaged. Therefore, after Wu Ming used the magic puppets to roughly repair the no-name buildings, a brand new and more simple building complex appeared in front of everyone. This made the original, no-name members quite moved. There was nothing more exciting than falling from a high place to a low place and then climbing back up. Not to mention Black Rabbit, Letitia and the other old members of No Name, even the new members like 16 Knights had a satisfied look on their faces. However, at the beginning, they had a shameless look on their faces as they refused to do it. What was going on? The situation was like this. When Ren proposed a thorough cleaning, everyone readily agreed, except for the 3 problem children, who were unwilling. Boring not doing it. I'm a lady. If the 2 of them don't want to do it, then I don't want to do it either. Then, when Wu Ming suggested that they could command the small magic puppets to clean, the 3 problem children's eyes lit up. Then he led the special-shaped magic puppet that Wu Ming had summoned with an item and left to clean up the mess. They were very interested in magic puppets, so how could they let go of such an opportunity to command magic puppets? As for the special magic puppets, they were basically the size of a person, large enough to walk into a house. There were no such magic puppets in Yggdrasil, but they couldn't resist Wu Ming's methods. Even the tools were modified by Wu Ming himself, so adding some special magic puppets was no problem at all. After all, magic puppets could be casually made. The essence of a magic puppet was a pile of rocks. Fire magic puppets, steel magic puppets, and the like were just a pile of rocks with a ball of flame or a large amount of iron added to it. Just like that, Wu Ming, Letitia, and Lily repaired the buildings on the outside, while Ren, Black Rabbit, and the 3 problem children cleaned up the inside. With almost unlimited magic puppets, whether it was repairing the buildings on the outside or cleaning on the inside, with these magic puppets and other people's commands, the efficiency could be said to be quite fast. If that wasn't the case, they wouldn't have been able to clean up all the buildings in No Name's territory in less than a day. By the way, while a large number of magic puppets were working, they also attracted the attention of more than 100 children from No Name. When the children asked for the reason, Wu Ming directly pushed the credit to Ren, making Ren, as the leader of the community, rise in the children's hearts. This made Ren somewhat helpless, but after all, Wu Ming had already said it, and even through the tools that were always activated into Ren's hands. In the end, Ren had no choice but to admit it on the spot. Wu Ming nodded his head in satisfaction as he stood in front of the majestic, no-name, white building complex that was filled with an ancient aura. Although the color is a bit monotonous, at least the quality is not bad. How could the quality be bad when using bricks worth 6 digits to build a house? It was already very extravagant, okay? After all, Villo, you only summoned white magic puppets, how could the color not be monotonous? As a sensitive beauty, Jiao Feinyao was very dissatisfied with the pure white bricks provided by Wu Ming. After all, rendering multiple colors was the most suitable color for a beautiful girl. That's too troublesome, it's more efficient to only produce the same type of magic puppet. Wu Ming shrugged his shoulders. Just like Gorgon, who had Tiamat's 100 beast power, she only produced the same type of magic beast at the beginning, but after a long time, she began to produce other types of magic beast. Because of the high efficiency. Wu Ming was the same. Copying and pasting the same magic puppet would definitely be more efficient than creating a different type. Although this was a tool that could summon unlimited magic puppets, after all, this was a tool that Wu Ming had modified himself, and Wu Ming's setting was that the user could choose the type of magic puppet. All in all, the final result was very good. Alright, we've been busy for a day, and the results are not bad, everyone go rest. At this time, Ren came out to show his effectiveness as a leader. That's true, this is the result of everyone's hard work. If we don't go in and try, we'll be wasting our efforts. Black Rabbit playfully closed one of her eyes and said to everyone. After all, what she said made sense, and it was already late, so everyone entered the finished building. As soon as they entered, they saw some magic puppets standing like guards in the no-name hall. These were the magic puppets that Wu Ming had specially created to clean the interior of the problem children. When all the buildings were repaired, Wu Ming had also taught Ren to stop summoning magic puppets. And because these magic puppets didn't need to sacrifice, their own bodies to repair the buildings, they were only used as coolies for cleaning, so these magic puppets didn't disappear. And now, they were standing like guards in the building, so it was probably the work of the 3 problem children. Everyone looked at 16 Knights and the other 2. 16 Knights and the other 2 didn't panic at all. Isn't this great, magic puppet guards? 16 Knights waved his hand. It's not a good habit to waste things. Jiao Yuao crossed her arms and said seriously, after all, they couldn't just let these magic puppets stand outside or waste them. This looks pretty good. Prai Hiroyuki didn't feel that he did anything wrong, so he had an innocent expression. Being guards isn't bad, after all, these magic puppets have 6-digit strength, so they're still useful for the current no name. After all, having a group of 6-digit guards was quite beneficial for the no name, which was 95% children. Just like when guards sent people to capture the no name children, if Wu Ming, 16 Knights, and the others weren't there was a high chance that they would have succeeded. Although Black Rabbit wasn't weak, she wasn't good at playing dirty. If she couldn't find those people, Black Rabbit couldn't do anything, right? Then everyone go to sleep, Rin said with concern. However, the 3 problem children and Wu Ming didn't move. Master? Letitia asked doubtfully. Following Wu Ming's gaze, Ren, Letitia, and the others looked at the table. There was a letter on it, and the symbol was a Valkyrie looking at each other. That was the symbol of this and yes. However, Ren, Black Rabbit, and the others had the same thought. It's over. Chapter 6:18. Why was it over? Because it was a letter from that and yes, and no name, and that and yes didn't have much contact. The only contact they had was with White Yiksha. Therefore, this letter was most likely sent by White Yiksha, and for White Yiksha to send a letter, something must have happened. The unknown was like catmint to a cat. It was quite attractive to children. And being targeted by problem children was a disaster in the eyes of benevolent Black Rabbit. It wasn't enough that he had harmed his own family, now he had to go out and harm others. Therefore, Black Rabbit's hair color changed, and then he suddenly jumped in the direction of the letter. Black Rabbit wanted to keep the letter in his pocket in advance. In short, he couldn't let the 3 problem children see the contents of the letter first. However, although Black Rabbit was fast, he couldn't beat 16 Knights. 16th Knights also jumped, but compared to Black Rabbit's jump, 16th Knight's jump was much more impressive. A strong hurricane swept past the no-name people, blowing their sleeves. The most pitiful one was Jiao Fei Niao, who was desperately holding onto her dress. Then, Wu Ming considerately waved his hand, canceling out the hurricane caused by 16 Knight's jump. Thanks. Jiao Fei Niao casually but elegantly responded to Wu Ming's gentlemanly behavior. You're welcome. Wu Ming shook his head indifferently. After a simple exchange, the 2's gazes returned to the battle between 16 Knights and Black Rabbit for the letter. 16 Knights and Black Rabbit were already in front of the letter, but if one looked closely, 16 Knights was in the lead. Damn it. For the future of the community, Black Rabbit will definitely not give this letter to Mr. 16 Knights. Black Rabbit suddenly exploded again. Oh. You're quite motivated. If you want to stop me for the future of the community, then come and try. 16 Knights laughed wantonly, and then suddenly sped up. The 2 reached out a hand almost at the same time, reaching for the letter on the table. But an accident happened. The shockwave from the impact of the powerful speed directly shattered the fragile table, and the envelope was blown to the side. 16 Knights and Black Rabbit quickly adjusted their bodies and turned to the other side of the envelope. However, the position of the envelope was now closer to 16 Knights, which made Black Rabbit panic. Just as 16 Knights was about to touch the envelope, a small black-purple ripple suddenly appeared under the envelope and devoured it. This caused 16 Knights to frown, while Black Rabbit heaved a sigh of relief. This was because no matter who got the letter, it couldn't fall into the hands of a problem child. Hey, little brother, what do you mean by this? Are you trying to pick a fight with me? 16 Knights turned around and glared at Wu Ming. He saw that Wu Ming was holding the envelope that had been swallowed by the blackish-purple ripple, and a small blackish-purple ripple was slowly disappearing above Wu Ming's arm. "What? Mr. Villo?" This made Black Rabbit, who had just heaved a sigh of relief, tense up again. Looking at it now, the small blackish-purple ripple was indeed his ability to teleport. The Black Rabbit reacted. "It's over." Black Rabbit's ears drooped. Although Wu Ming said that he was stable during this period, Black Rabbit still couldn't forget that Wu Ming's nature was also a problem child. Alright, half a problem. However, half a problem child was still a problem child. At this moment, Black Rabbit's back was already gray, and she seemed to have seen the end of the community. "You don't have to be so dramatic." Wu Ming shrugged. "Don't worry, I won't give it to the 3 problem children, just trust me." Wu Ming's words gave Black Rabbit hope. "Mr. Villo." Black Rabbit looked at Wu Ming, touched. It seemed that half a problem child wouldn't mix with a real problem child. Then, Wu Ming gave Black Rabbit a "trust me" look, and then looked at 16 Knights. Stealing the other party's prey would definitely make the other party unhappy. Even if it was Wu Ming, 16 Knights wouldn't forgive it. Then, Wu Ming smiled at 16 Knights, opened the envelope, and read 10 lines at a glance. Eh? Black Rabbit was surprised at Wu Ming's action of opening the letter. However, if Wu Ming could not tell 16 Knights and the others the content, then she could understand. Then, Wu Ming read the main content of the letter under Black Rabbit's petrified figure. "I see, the North District is holding a fire dragon birth ceremony. This is an invitation letter from White Yaksha." Fire dragon birth ceremony? Jio Uesuka and Hirai Hiroyuki were confused. Including the North District's art and crafts, as well as the appraisal, there will be many gift competitions, and the central event is scheduled to be a large-scale ceremony for the rulers of the class. That's what the letter says, but I think 16 Knights should be interested. Wu Ming squinted his eyes and smiled at reverse 16 Knights. At the same time, he revealed a meaningful smile. "Of course, I'm very interested in it." 16 Knights against the wind laughed. Then, Black Rabbit cried. "You problematic children, ah." After Letitia and Lily comforted Black Rabbit, everyone returned to their rooms to sleep. Although the 3 problem children were indeed too excited to sleep, even though Black Rabbit was crying, she still shouldered the heavy responsibility of being the mother of no-name problem children and kept the letter. If you want to go to the North District to participate in the Fire Dragon Birth ceremony, then go to sleep. Under Black Rabbit's reprimand, the 3 problematic children gave her face and returned to their rooms to sleep. Wu Ming also returned to his room with Letitia under Black Rabbit's resentful gaze. However, Black Rabbit was helpless. Wu Ming didn't lie to her. Wu Ming didn't show 16 Knights and the other 2 problematic children the letter. He read it out for the 3 problematic children. After all, Wu Ming followed the rules, so Black Rabbit couldn't say anything. She could only use her eyes to express her silent resentment. As for Wu Ming bringing Letitia back to his room, it was naturally because the maid had to help the master change his clothes to sleep. Of course, although accompanying the master to sleep was within Letitia's acceptable range as a maid, after all, Wu Ming didn't have that intention. Therefore, when Wu Ming began to sleep, Letitia left Wu Ming's room. However, Letitia, who had the key to Wu Ming's room, still stood in front of Wu Ming the next morning before he woke up. When Wu Ming opened his eyes, the first thing he saw was this pretty lowly girl in front of him. "It's morning." Wu Ming shook his head, trying to wake up. "Yes, master. It's already morning. 16 Knights and the others can't wait." This made Wu Ming smile helplessly. "Then let's exhaust their patience." Then, Letitia helped Wu Ming wash up and change his clothes. "Let's go, Letitia. Let's see how the problematic children are doing." Chapter 619. After quickly finishing his breakfast, Wu Ming went to the hall where the members of No Name usually gathered. Then, Wu Ming opened the door and walked in with Letitia. Hey, bro, we woke up so early without the blonde lowly service. Why did you wake up so late?" As soon as he entered, Wu Ming heard 16 Knights teasing him. "It's obviously the 3 of you who are too excited. My biological clock is normal." He helplessly glanced at 16 Nights, Jiyoyuki, and Hirai Hibakushi before casually finding a sofa to sit down. Letitia made Wuming some black tea. Give me a cup too, thank you. Seeing Letitia's action, Jiyoyuki smiled and raised her hand. Me too. Hirai Hibakushi's delicate little face sparkled with interest. He looked like a kitten that was interested in the black tea. Then give me a cup too. 16 Nights naturally didn't have much interest in the black tea, but since everyone ordered it, he also ordered a cup with the intention of tasting it. What do you think Letitia is? She's my personal maid. Wuming said with slight jealousy. At the same time, he narrowed his eyes and helplessly looked at the three problem children. That's funny. I won, Letitia. It's just that you used your ability to take advantage of the loophole. 16 Nights responded uncomfortably. Letitia ruined the gift competition that we were going to participate in. Making some black tea as compensation shouldn't be a problem. Jiyoyuki hit the main point. That's right. Villo is so stingy. Hirai Hibakushi hugged the three-furred cat and looked at Wuming with disdain. The three problem children's counterattack made Wuming not know whether to laugh or cry. You're the only one with a lot of twisted logic. Wuming replied unyieldingly. After that, he didn't say anything else. Letitia also brewed black tea for 4 people. The conversation between the 4 of them was just a casual joke. Therefore, Letitia still brewed black tea for 16 Nights and the others. Then, while Letitia was making tea, Wuming started talking to 16 Nights and the other 2. Where's Ren and Black Rabbit? The 2 of them should have woken up already. Why don't I see them? Wuming asked. Because Black Rabbit had a problem child in No Name, he woke up very early every day in order to supervise the problem child. As for Ren, he also showed a slightly excited expression yesterday. After all, Ren was still an 11-year-old child, and it was inevitable that he would be interested in the sacrifice. Therefore, Wuming judged that the 2 of them must have woken up. Moreover, they had agreed to go to White Yiksha's place today to see how the fire dragon's birth ceremony was going. As the leader of the community, Ren he had to look after the 3 problem children. It was impossible for Black Rabbit to be absent. Ren went to the library after breakfast. Black Rabbit is helping Lily and the others with farming. Hirai Hiroyuki answered Wuming's question. As the leader of the community, Ren naturally seized the time to learn all kinds of knowledge. Therefore, it was understandable that he went to the underground library after breakfast to learn. Black Rabbit's words were also understandable. While repairing the buildings, Wuming also gave the magic puppet authority to the members of No Name. Naturally, this included Lily and the others. With the magic puppets, Lily and the other logistics team could cultivate crops more easily. Therefore, taking advantage of this opportunity, Lily took a few magic puppets to the city early in the morning. She used the event funds to buy various kinds of crop seeds and seedlings. Then she let the magic puppets bring a lot of seeds and seedlings. It had to be said that this time, Lily was in the limelight of No Name. A 6-digit number was already a very strong existence among the 7-digit number. Everyone in the city knew that Lily, a normal member of No Name, actually had a few 6-digit magic puppets. This naturally caused a huge uproar. However, it seemed that some people had found out through the grapevine that a strong person had joined No Name. Everyone no longer viewed No Name as a group of trash. Therefore, there were no more attempts to steal Lily's magic puppet from them. However, this time, No Name's reputation was one step higher. After that, Lily, who came back, breathed a sigh of relief and began to cultivate. As a restless Black Rabbit, she naturally had to find something for herself to do. Moreover, with such a large piece of land, how could she not use it properly? Now was not the same as before. Now there was no lack of labor, seeds, water, soil, everything was available. Therefore, the little fox girl Lily began to cultivate with a dozen or so slightly older children. Black Rabbit also began to plan the use of No Name's land. Then, Wuming's eyes turned cold. He found a problem. It seemed that everyone woke up earlier than him. After realizing this, Wuming felt a little awkward. Lily had already woken up early, and so did Black Rabbit. Although Ren was a child, he did not want to disappoint the community after the renovation, so he directly woke up early and began to bury his head in the library. The three problem children were so excited that they could not sleep and woke up early, so he directly ignored them. They are all working hard, Wu Ming said as he picked up the black tea that Letitia brewed and drank it. After all, there are many things to be done in the community. This is normal. Jiao Fei Niao also drank the black tea that Letitia brewed. Not bad, Letitia. I am a little envious of the Villo. Jiao Fei Niao said with jealousy. If Fei Niao still wants to drink, I can make some for you in the future. Letitia smiled slightly. Really? Then it's a deal. Jiao Fei Niao's eyes lit up and then continued to drink the tea. Beside Jiao Fei Niao, Harai Hiroyuki dipped his finger in the tea and put it in front of Sanmao's mouth to let Sanmao taste it first. Sanmao said that it smells good. Harai Hiroyuki had the ability to communicate with animals, so no one thought that it was strange for her to talk to a cat. As long as you like it. Letitia nodded with a smile. On the other side of the single-seater sofa opposite Wu Ming, the villainous 16 Knights Reverse drank the black tea in a very standard manner. This black tea is really good. Reverse 16 Knights Reverse praised. Of course, this was the black tea that Luos drank in Perseus. With that hedonistic second-generation heir's spirit of enjoyment, this tea would definitely be of excellent quality. I really underestimated you, 16 Kuan. I didn't expect a villainess like you to have such good taste in black tea. Jiao Fei Niao tasted the fragrance of the tea. Indeed, Reverse 16 Knights Reverse did not seem like a newbie's tea drinking method, but more like a veteran aristocrat who had been drinking for a long time. Because I am a villainous person with such good taste. Reverse 16 Knights Reverse, shamelessly, smiled. At this moment, the door was opened. A pair of blue rabbit ears entered the four's eyes. Everyone, are you ready? We are going to visit Lord Byakuya. Then, the four, including Wu Ming, smiled confidently. Of course. Chapter 620. Thousand Eyes Branch. Wu Ming, Letitia, 16th Knights, Flying Bird, Dazzle, Ren, and Black Rabbit sat in a row. And in front of the six of them sat White Yiksha. Thou came rather quickly. White Yiksha used a paper fan to cover the lower half of his face. His eyes were slightly closed as though he had just woken up. After all, we have quite a number of problem children here. Furthermore, it's a grand memorial. There's nothing wrong with being a little more proactive, right? Wu Ming joked with White Yiksha. Indeed. White Yiksha glanced at 16 Knights and the other two. During this period of time, the names of the three problem children of no name were well known in the lower levels of the East District. Even White Yiksha had heard of them. Then White Yiksha, it's about time you tell us the truth. 16th Knights didn't mind White Yiksha's gaze as he asked a question that puzzled Ren and Black Rabbit. What do you mean? Black Rabbit's ears perked up as he asked. Ren and Black Rabbit couldn't understand 16th Knights' words. From their point of view, it was only because of no-name strength that they were invited by White Yiksha, who was the ruler of the social strata. Although your thoughts aren't wrong, how can it be that simple? It could only be said that their thoughts were too easy to guess. 16th Knights could tell at a glance. First of all, there's a problem with this fire dragon's birth ritual. Then, 16th Knights looked at Wu Ming. Brother, you should be able to tell, right? Wu Ming nodded. It's clearly a ceremony in the North District, but it has to be held together with the East District. There's clearly a problem. With that, Ren and Black Rabbit also understood. That's right. Although the relationship between the various strata wasn't bad, it wasn't good either. No, it should be said that they didn't interfere with each other and didn't interact with each other. After all, the difference was too great. Even if they wanted to interact, it was very difficult. Therefore, even if it was a rare grand memorial in the North District, there was no need to hold it together with the East District. Furthermore, you even called us over. I'm afraid there's something special you need us to do. Then, 16th Knight smiled. I can't wait. However, the smile of this problematic child made Black Rabbit and Run a little worried. "Oh, your thoughts are still very clear, Villo and 16 Knights of Reverse." White Yaksha praised the two of them. "But even if nothing happened, I was prepared to invite all of you to this memorial ceremony." In other words, did something really happen, Lord White Yaksha? Black Rabbit began to feel nervous. "Before I begin to explain this matter, I'll say that I received the invitation before the preparations for this memorial ceremony. This was also why White Yaksha said that he would invite no name even if there was no emergency. However, some time ago, a member of Thous and Yes who had been sleeping suddenly woke up and made a prophecy. Immediately after, by Yaksha's expression froze. A devil king will attack during the fire dragon birth ceremony. As soon as he said that, Renha and Heitu's face tightened. The three problem children became excited. Only Wuming's face did not change. "May I ask how accurate the prophecy is?" Haruhito Hikari asked. After all, a prophecy was just a prophecy. There were times when things like this were wrong, although it was rare. Renha and Heitu looked at White Yaksha's answer expectantly. Having experienced the Devil King's attack, they felt lucky about this prophecy. 100%. White Yaksha's words were like a sharp blade that pierced into Renha and Heitu's hearts, shattering their expectations. It's a pity. Although I also want to treat this prophecy as that member's wrong prophecy, that members' prophecies have always been 100% successful. There has never been a single failure. This is really a regrettable result. 16th Knights of Reverse said casually, sounding like he was gloating. However, everyone present understood that this was the characteristic of a problematic child like 16th Knights of Reverse. To put it nicely, he spoke without mercy. To put it bluntly, he had a foul mouth. "Lord White Yaksha, did you specifically look for us because of the Devil King's attack?" Black Rabbit appeared serious and serious. After all, he was a Devil King. He could not afford to relax at all. "Of course. Didn't you use defeating the Devil King as your common slogan? Then, you have to be more realistic. Otherwise, you will become a joke to others." White Yaksha chuckled, looking rather wretched. "Of course, before you make a move on the Devil King, I will take care of him," White Yaksha said proudly. Wuming had learned some things about White Yaksha in advance, so Wuming did not doubt White Yaksha's arrogant words at all. Even 16th Knights, Flying Bird, and Radiance had learned about White Yaksha after living in this world for so long. Sun and White Knight's star spirit, originally a two-digit Devil King, materialized by the heavenly shaking prophecy. Furthermore, even if his strength was negated and weakened because of the heavenly shaking prophecy, his combat strength could still be ranked in the top 10. In order to reassure the gods and Buddhas, he voluntarily lowered his spirit level and accepted the Yaksha divinity of Buddhism, becoming the current ruler of the East District. Although White Yaksha's strength was weakened again after accepting the Yaksha divinity of Buddhism, he was not someone that any Tom, Dick, or Harry could ignore. At the very least, one had to have a 3-digit strength to be able to compete with the current White Yaksha. In other words, if the number of Devil Kings attacking at the Fire Dragon's birth ceremony was below 3 digits, then there was no chance of winning against White Yaksha. And if a 3-digit Devil King appeared in the lower levels, the gods and Buddhas in the upper levels would not sit idly by. White Yaksha accepted the Yaksha divinity and weakened her strength because she wanted to become the ruler of the lower levels with a 2-digit strength and protect the people. Otherwise, the gods and Buddhas in the upper levels would not allow her to descend. Although White Yaksha was said to be the strongest in the middle and lower levels, Wuming was still a little worried. Don't underestimate the enemy, White Yaksha. The news that you will host the biggest gift competition with the ruler of the North District must have spread. It's impossible that the attacking Devil King did not receive the news. Although Wuming did not finish his sentence, everyone understood what Wuming meant. Knowing that White Yaksha would attend the North District's grand memorial ceremony and still come to attack, this Devil King must have been prepared. Speaking of which, is the reason why the East and North District are holding the ceremony together because of the Devil King's attack? Haruhito Hikari raised his doubts. Then, White Yaksha calmly said something that surprised everyone. Actually, the fire dragon's birth ceremony is held by the East and North District in name, but in reality, I'm the only one from the East District. Oh, so that's why you came to us? No name? Chapter 621. North District 54545 Outer Gate, at the entrance of the Here and Yes store. In the distance, a huge red boundary wall that separated the East and North Districts stood there, and the boundary couldn't be seen on both sides of the boundary wall. Gothic spires were scattered all over the city, and there were traces of reclamation on the boundary wall, and some places were hollowed out as exhibition halls. A large number of glass artworks were placed on the streets and in front of shops. As if to add to the atmosphere, there were candlesticks and clown-like people walking on the streets. Walking candlesticks? Gyo-yuki excitedly pulled her eye Hiroyuki. It's true, this place is completely different from the East District. Although she wasn't as excited as Gyo-yuki, she was still quite surprised. It seemed that the fact that this was the North District had been confirmed. It seems that White Yiksha didn't lie to us, then what was that trick just now? Compared to confirming whether this was the North District, 16 Knights was more interested in White Yiksha's trick. It's just a small trick, the branches of Here and Yes are the same, they all have the ability to transfer to each other. White Yiksha pointed at the branch behind him that was exactly the same as the East District's Here and Yes. So that's how it is. Renha Black Rabbit nodded. Wuming didn't think that transferring between the North District and East District was as simple as White Yiksha said. Wuming noticed a strong spatial fluctuation. Wuming could determine that no one present except himself and White Yiksha noticed the spatial fluctuation. It seems that White Yiksha really can't be underestimated. Wuming thought. Well, the North District has a completely different culture from the East District, so you should enjoy yourselves before the ceremony begins. After all, if he didn't smooth out the anger of these problem children, they would cause a ruckus when the ceremony officially began. I have something to do, so I'll leave first. White Yiksha waved his hand and left. Seeing 16 Knights and the others' interest, Wuming didn't suppress it, but went along with it. Then let's start shopping. In fact, this sentence was said to the 3 problem children. Then we'll go first. 16 Knights said goodbye, then walked toward the more prosperous central area with Gyo-yuki and her eye Hiroyuki. Wait, Black Rabbit is worried about you walking alone. Black Rabbit wants to follow you. Black Rabbit quickly said, then followed 16 Knights and the others. Sure enough, Black Rabbit was worried that the 3 problem children would cause trouble, so it sacrificed shopping time to supervise them. Wuming shook his head, not knowing whether to laugh or cry. Then, Wuming looked at Letitia, who was still in her maid uniform. Letitia, you go and help keep an eye on them. Yes, master. Letitia led assistant. Wuming looked at the last person around him, our leader, Ren. Actually, I also want to go for a walk. Ren, what are your plans? Wuming was asking if Ren wanted to be abandoned and walk alone, or to walk with Wuming. That, I want to visit my former ally. Ren awkwardly scratched the back of his head. Ally? Wuming was surprised, then he understood. After all, the predecessor of No Name was the largest community in the East District. It wasn't strange for them to have allies in other districts. Then I'll walk with you. After all, Wuming was slightly interested in this former ally. Yes, thank you so much, Mr. Villo. Ren nodded. After all, Ren was only an 11-year-old child. Walking alone in a place he had never been before would definitely cause him to be afraid. On the way to the ally that Ren mentioned, Wuming and Ren began to chat. Speaking of which, I didn't hear you mention that we have an ally. Wuming put his hands in his pockets, looked forward, and observed the surroundings. He seemed to ask casually, actually, our No Name has already cut off contact with that ally for 3 years. Ren said without much confidence. Cut off contact, huh? Wuming looked at the surrounding scenery and narrowed his eyes. This made him think of a lot of things. It's the other party who unilaterally broke the contract, right? Wuming still asked casually. But when Ren heard Wuming's words, his body slightly stiffened, then he immediately reacted. Well, after all, we are already No Name. It's not strange that they unilaterally broke the contract. Although that was what he said, the dispirited tone in Ren's voice was still obvious. What was the saying, when it rains, it pours? The current situation was exactly what it meant. After the Demon King's attack, the flag, name, and companions were all taken away, and then the other allies unilaterally broke the contract. Wu Ming believed that this kind of, when it rains, it pours, situation must have happened many times in the past 3 years. For Ren He and He Tu to be able to hold on under such circumstances for 3 years, it could be said that the bitterness within was not enough to be told to outsiders. It was impossible to explain it all clearly in a short time. But after all, we are allies. A visit is still necessary, although it's a little. Ren lowered his head and told Wu Ming. But before Ren could finish, he was interrupted by Wu Ming. Pa dash! Wu Ming suddenly put his hand on Ren's shoulder, and Ren subconsciously stopped. Mr. Villo? Ren looked at Wu Ming in confusion. Don't worry, Ren. If you want to go, then go boldly. I'm not even afraid of White Yaksha. Why would I be afraid of a bad ally who unilaterally broke the contract? Wu Ming smiled at Ren. Remember, although they looked down on us in the past, we will make them unworthy in the future. Wu Ming's words made Ren slightly stunned. But Ren did not think that Wu Ming's words were a bluff. It wasn't just the powerful Wu Ming, but with 16 knights and the other 2, the rise of No Name was inevitable. Although the 3 of them were problem children, it was much better to do bad things than good things. Let's go, let's meet our ally. Because there was still some distance to go, Ren told Wu Ming about the community of this former ally. The 5-digit middle-level community, Salamandra, was based at the place where No Name and the others were at now, the outer gate of 54,545. It was a hereditary community with a flame dragon pattern as its flag. The members of the community had a wide range of viper bloodlines, and at the same time, they dominated many viper species. In short, it was a community based on group strength. Coincidentally, this was the opposite of the current No Name. The current No Name was a community of individual strength. After all, they were few in number but powerful. After Ren told Wu Ming the basic information, the 2 arrived at the entrance of Salamandra base. Chapter 622. The base of Salamandra, in front of Wu Ming and Ren, was not a large and imposing building. However, compared to the ordinary buildings around it, the base of Salamandra was clearly different and had a unique temperament. In front of the gate of the Salamandra base, there were 2 guards with dragon horns on their heads. Their faces were slightly red and ferocious, and they looked ferocious. There was no doubt that these 2 people had a trace of the fire dragon viper's blood in their bodies, which caused their faces to be slightly dragonized. Their faces were slightly red and they had dragon horns on their heads. One of the guards saw Wu Ming and Ren walk to the front of Salamandra's gate and immediately stopped them. Please stop, this is Salamandra's base, unrelated people are not allowed to enter. Although the guard used the word, please, and his tone was not that bad, it was not friendly at all. After Wu Ming heard this, he could not help but laugh out loud. Seeing the 2 guards frowning because of Wu Ming's laughter, Ren nervously pulled on Wu Ming's sleeve, his eyes showing a trace of helplessness. Big brother, don't laugh, can't you see that his eyes are not right? Wu Ming read such thoughts from Ren's eyes. However, Wu Ming could not help laughing. Although Ren had only been the leader for 3 years, as the leader of the allied community, the people of Salamandra did not recognize him and even said something like, unrelated people. How could Wu Ming not laugh? However, it could also be confirmed that after Salamandra unilaterally broke the agreement with No Name, they really did not have any contact with No Name. Otherwise, how could the other party not recognize the leader of the allied community? From the time Ren told Wu Ming that Salamandra unilaterally broke the agreement, Wu Ming did not have a good impression of this community. Unilaterally kicking away an ally when it had no value, and without any reason at all, this was not how a person should behave. Although Wu Ming did not know what kind of mentality the leader of Salamandra had when he cooperated with No Name, but Wu Ming knew that the other party did not have any sincerity now. Since this was the case, Then Wu Ming did not need to be friendly with the other party. Wu Ming stopped laughing and pressed Ren's shoulder, indicating for him to calm down. Then, Wu Ming looked at the guard. Salamandra's ally in the East District is here to visit. Please inform them. Wu Ming's words were the same as the guard's before. Although his tone was not that bad, it was not friendly either. The guard's tone was not good, Wu Ming and Ren. However, Wu Ming's tone made the guard angry. How dare you? I have never heard of any alliance between Salamandra and the East District. Hurry up and leave this place. This is the base of Salamandra. We will not allow you people to behave so atrociously. The guard who asked the question earlier had an impatient look on his face and pointed his spear at Wu Ming and Ren. Hurry up and leave. Salamandra is a middle-class community with a 5-digit number. If you continue to stay here, you will suffer. The other guard was slightly more friendly and did not point his weapon at Wu Ming and Ren. He only waved his hand at the two of them, indicating for them to leave quickly. The two's actions reflected their personalities. It could only be said that they were worthy of having the Fire Dragon Viper's bloodline. Their tempers were slightly irritable. Wu Ming was not angry because of these two small characters. Instead, he thought of something else. Since these two people were arranged to guard the door, it meant that their position in Salamandra was not high. It was not wrong for them to not know about the alliance between Salamandra and No Name. Looking at the two's actions, it did not seem like they were lying. In other words, the leader of Salamandra not only unilaterally broke the agreement with No Name, but also blocked the news. But thinking about it, it was not surprising that such a vulgar community could do such a thing. Thinking about this, Wu Ming stopped thinking about it and smiled at the guard who pointed his weapon at him. Bang! As if something exploded, a soft but hurried sound came from the guard's spear. This gave the guard a fright. Then he realized that his spear had broken. Clang! The spear head fell to the ground and made a sound. Looks like Salamandra's weapon isn't that sturdy. It actually broke on its own after using it for a while. Wu Ming laughed mockingly. You bastard? What kind of strange gift did you use? The guard whose weapon broke retreated in panic. The other guard next to him held his spear and looked at Wu Ming cautiously. Then he ordered the guard who retreated 2 steps. Hurry! Hurry and call for help. It seemed that this guard was more experienced than the hot-tempered guard. But in Wu Ming's eyes he was still very young. Then, after hearing the guard's words, the guard ran away. No, he went to call for help. And the guard who was in a stalemate with Wu Ming had his weapon broken under Wu Ming's smile. The guard was shocked and retreated. There was no other way. Wu Ming's invisible telekinesis was too strange. To be honest, what if the next thing to break was his head? At this time, a voice came from the door. Hurry, hurry, hurry. Someone is causing trouble in Salamandra. It seemed that the other side had called for help. Wu Ming smiled slightly. Mr. Villo, why don't we leave quickly? Ren pulled Wu Ming's hand unnaturally and whispered. Don't worry. We came with sincerity today. If they want to cause trouble, then let them come. We are not afraid. Wu Ming patted Ren's shoulder confidently, indicating that he should be more confident. However, Ren was about to cry. How is this sincerity? You are clearly here to cause trouble. However, Ren also knew that Wu Ming was half a problem child. Then, Ren gave up persuading Wu Ming, because the other side's people had already surrounded the two of them. Wu Ming looked at the people surrounding him with weapons. These people were all members of the Salamandra community who had the blood of the alternative dragon. There were even a few alternative flying dragons in the sky that were ridden by the members of Salamandra. As for Salamandra, it was obvious that they were ganging up on him, which attracted the attention of the surrounding passers-by. Moreover, although Salamandra's base was not in the downtown area, it was not in the suburbs either. Therefore, there were many other shops around. To put it simply, a lot of people had gathered around to watch the fun. Chapter 6:23. Look, someone is causing trouble in front of Salamandra. What? Someone actually dares to cause trouble. Don't they know that the ceremony hosted by Salamandra will be opening in 2 days? They've hit the nail on the head. Salamandra has been on full alert for the past 2 days. They're afraid that someone will cause trouble. That's right. If they dare to cause trouble during this period of time, they'll be miserable. But they don't seem to be from the North District. Speaking of which, I heard that in order to make the ceremony go smoothly, Salamandra invited the ruler of the East District. Really? The ruler of the East District, Lord Whiteyiksha, is here? With Wuming's super hearing, Wuming basically heard all the words of the passers-by without missing anything. However, there was one thing that made Wuming feel awkward. It was not strange for the North District to know that the ruler of the East District was Whiteyiksha, but it sounded like they respected Whiteyiksha. But it was also true. Although Whiteyiksha was very casual in front of Wuming and the others like a problematic child, he was still a demon lord with a 2-digit number. Usually, he was a very dignified existence to the outside world. Moreover, the ruler of the East District was the guardian that protected the people of the lower class. Naturally, he would be respected. However, if they knew that Whiteyiksha's true face was actually a problematic child, their belief would probably collapse. At this moment, Wuming suddenly heard a more useful information. Speaking of which, I seem to have seen Lord Whiteyiksha's figure enter Salamandra's base. Whiteyiksha is also in Salamandra. Wuming laughed. His laughter became more and more miserable. A thought called causing trouble lingered in Wuming's mind. Looking at Wuming's smile, Ren, who was already extremely worried, became even more worried. I shouldn't have let the Villo accompany me. Instead, I should have let him walk around alone. Ren could not help but speak his mind. However, how could this escape Wuming's eyes and ears? Don't worry, the face that No Name lost today when Salamandra unilaterally abandoned the contract, I will take it back in double, leader. Wuming emphasized the word leader, which made Ren stunned. After pausing for a few seconds, Ren nodded emotionally. Thank you very much, Mr. Villo. Please help me regain the face of No Name, please. Ren bowed to Wuming. Although Ren had always valued peace, he was not a person who would not fight back when he was bullied. In the past, they didn't fight back because they didn't have the strength. But now, the community had taken in a new powerful partner. Since he wasn't strong enough, he had to know how to rely on his companions and trust them. It was because Renjin believed that his partner would return one day that he and Black Rabbit worked tirelessly to protect their no-name community. And those partners who left, compared to Letitia who had already returned, believed that the remaining members of the community would protect this home. Wuming suddenly grabbed Ren's arm and lifted his body. How can I let the leader bow to a member, especially in this kind of environment? Wuming said as he casually looked at the people of Salamandra, who had a fierce look on their faces. Ren also reacted. Ren, you have to remember, you are the leader of the community. You can't do what you did today again. Wuming warned Ren seriously. Yes, I understand, Mr. Villo. Ren straightened his spine and responded firmly. Then, Wuming's face instantly turned into a casual smile. However, you still have a long way to go. Do your best, Leader Ren. Wuming smiled and patted Ren's shoulder. Then, he looked at the people of Salamandra. What, you're not going to attack? Wuming smiled again. This smile scared the young man who was the first to have his weapon broken by Wu Ming's strange method and made him retreat. The others also looked nervous. It seemed that the other party knew that their weapons were broken after Wu Ming's strange smile. Needless to say, it must have been the young man who told them. It was also because of their vigilance that this group of people didn't attack Wu Ming rashly. This allowed Wu Ming and Ren to have a rare opportunity to talk while surrounded by people. This was a rare experience. There wouldn't be a next time. Isn't Salamandra famous for ganging up on people? But today, I've seen the hospitality of Salamandra. Wuming smiled lightly. However, this smile coupled with this sentence was really ridiculing. This made the people of Salamandra grit their teeth. Their faces that were originally red because of the fire dragon's blood turned red once again. However, Wuming's words reminded them that Salamandra's Tactics were group battles. There was no such thing as a one-on-one duel. Therefore, they were no longer polite. Everyone attacked together. Let him see the power of Salamandra. Among them, the young man who had his weapon broken by Wu Ming's telekinesis changed his weapon and pointed it at Wu Ming. In his opinion, Wu Ming's ability definitely couldn't be used on so many people. Moreover, they were a community that was good at group battles. Therefore, attacking together was the best choice. Oh, oh, oh! The people of Salamandra roared, cheering themselves on. However, when this group of people was about to rush up and attack Wu Ming closed his eyes. Looks like I'll have to teach you guys what it means to have a person stronger than you. Following that, Wu Ming suddenly opened his eyes. In an instant, an invisible pressure engulfed the surroundings. They couldn't move. Although that was the case, their bodies were trembling instinctively. A pair of golden vertical pupils were engraved in the hearts of every Salamandra member present. At the same time, the fear of Wu Ming was also engraved in their hearts. Because of Wu Ming's precise manipulation, the passers-by and Ren were not affected at all. In their opinion, it was just that Salamandra members had stopped immediately after moving. But what happened? I don't know. Why did Salamandra stop fighting? Could it be that they were scared stiff? How could that be? The two people that they surrounded didn't do anything. What the hell is this? However, it wasn't that everyone didn't have the insight. I think I saw that man close his eyes and then open them again. The members of Salamandra stopped moving the moment he opened his eyes. Really? You didn't see wrongly, right? Is it really as scary as you say? It can't be some kind of powerful gift, right? Because these passers-by didn't dare to get too close to Salamandra, encircling Wu Ming and Ren, they didn't see the change in Wu Ming's eyes. At this time, a lazy but familiar voice came from Salamandra's main door, Wu Ming. Chapter 624. Hearing the familiar voice, Wu Ming looked at the door. You're finally out, White Yiksha. Wu Ming said as he removed the pressure on the members of Salamandra. Crash! The weapons scattered on the ground. The members of Salamandra who were originally holding these weapons also sat on the ground one by one, panting heavily as if they were drowning and had just been fished out of the water. As if confirming Wu Ming's words, White Yiksha slowly walked out of the door. However, White Yiksha wasn't the only one who walked out. Behind him was a man and a woman with dragon horns. They were obviously members of Salamandra. The man was tall and had a fiery red crew cut that was 10 centimeters long. He wore a long jacket with long sleeves that reached his ankles. Perhaps it was because of custom or something else, the man wore cool sandals on his feet. There was also an extraordinary-looking sword at his waist. The man's face was rather capable and experienced. On his forehead above his eyebrows, there was an obvious bulge that extended to both sides of his forehead. Compared to the other members of Salamandra, it was thicker and sturdier, with dragon horns growing out from it. Wu Ming could tell that this guy's Viper Dragon bloodline was quite advanced. However, Wu Ming was a little unhappy when he looked at him and run with disgust from time to time. Wu Ming was sure that if this guy was not the leader, then he was a member of the upper echelons who knew about no name. Looking at the other person beside him, it was a young girl with a small body. Her height was only half the height of the man beside her, and she looked abnormally young. The young girl wore a special golden hair accessory on her head. Her fiery red hair was tied into a high ponytail at the back of her head. Her forehead was slightly parted in the middle, and there were 2 long vertical strands of hair on both sides of her head. The girl's upper body was only covered by clothes that covered her chest and a small section of her arm, looking rather open. Her lower body was a more conservative skirt that reached below her knees and had a flame dragon pattern printed on it. The girl's feet were also wearing the same cool open-toed shoes as the man beside her. The girl's waist did not have a sword, but the girl's wrists and ankles had golden ornaments, which added a hint of appeal to the girl. Asterisk cough cough asterisk. Asterisk, although it was a little embarrassing to think like this, Wu Ming had no choice. The young girl's clothes were a little revealing, but looking at her age, it was not considered revealing. In Wu Ming's opinion, the other party should be, no, to be precise, she was indeed not a young girl. She should be a young girl. In Wu Ming's opinion, this young girl was probably not an adult yet. Or rather, this young girl looked about the same age as Ren. From the small and weak dragon horns on both sides of the young girl's forehead, which almost made Wu Ming doubt if they were real, it could be seen that the young girl's age was probably not that old. More importantly, there was a hint of panic in the girl's eyes. It was exactly the same as Ren's eyes when Wu Ming saw Ren. However, this made Wu Ming certain one thing, and that was, this young girl was probably the current leader of Salamandra. After all, if it was not an important position, Salamandra would not let such a young girl follow White Yaksha and that man out. It was not like No Name had no one to use, so they let Ren become the leader of the community. And when Wu Ming was sizing up the young girl, the man beside her began to frown even more. No Name, guy, put away your rude gaze. The man loudly scolded Wu Ming. This scolding made the young girl's body tremble slightly. Wu Ming's eyes flashed. In fact, if it was not for the fact that he saw the same hard work in the young girl's eyes as Ren, Wu Ming would probably think that the young girl was holding the emperor to order his subjects by the man beside her. What a coincidence, White Yaksha, why are you here? Ignoring the particularly arrogant man, Wu Ming looked at White Yaksha. This made the man frown even more, but because of White Yaksha and the surrounding passers-by, as well as his own subordinates, he temporarily endured. Eh? Don't you know? Salamandra is the community that is holding this fire dragon's birth ceremony. Didn't I tell you? White Yaksha was surprised. As expected. Wu Ming nodded knowingly. This was why the passers-by said that Salamandra had quit smoking in order to hold the ceremony, and why they said that they had invited White Yaksha. After hearing the passers-by's words, Wu Ming began to make guesses. In the end, the truth was just as Wu Ming had guessed. Then he looked at the young girl behind White Yaksha. This so-called fire dragon's birth ceremony was probably related to this young child. However, you really didn't tell us that No Name's ally is holding this ceremony, White Yaksha. As Wu Ming spoke, he pushed Ren, who had not spoken since he saw the two people behind White Yaksha, forward. Wu Ming's words seemed normal, but in fact, there was a hidden killing intent. This was undoubtedly mocking Salamandra's unilateral act of breaking the contract. The expression of the man behind White Yaksha changed. He probably understood it, but the young girl did not change at all. Now, because she was not shrewd enough, she did not understand the meaning behind Wu Ming's words. White Yaksha's expression also showed a hint of embarrassment. After all, it was her mistake this time. She knew that Salamandra and No Name used to be allies, but because of the big changes between No Name and Salamandra, coupled with White Yaksha's carelessness, it led to this accident. It's just No Name. It's no longer qualified to be our ally. The man did not hold back this time, or rather, he had reached his limit. He directly said, "It's just a mere." This made the passers-by and Salamandra members stunned. It seemed like this nameless No Name was really an ally of Salamandra. However, the man did not care about other people's gazes. His expression did not change. However, the young girl's face turned slightly red. She looked a little embarrassed. After all, Salamandra was the one who unilaterally broke the contract. They did not have the advantage. Seeing the disharmony in the scene, White Yaksha tried to smooth things over. "Alright, everyone. Let's go in and have a chat." Wu Ming and Ren naturally did not mind. The young girl from No Name did not disagree. However, the man was unhappy that mere No Name had entered his community. "I'm helping you, Mandela. You don't want to continue making a fool of Salamandra, right?" White Yaksha whispered to the man named Mandela. However, this silence was only for the passers-by and Salamandra members who were sitting on the ground. To Wu Ming and the others, this little bit of sound could be heard. In the end, Mandela frowned and nodded helplessly. All right then. Chapter 625. Wu Ming brought Ren and followed White Yaksha into Salamandra's base without any hesitation. They entered Salamandra's living room. When they arrived at the living room, White Yaksha and Wu Ming did not stand on ceremony. They went straight to the guest seats and sat down. This made Ren a little nervous. He kept complaining helplessly, "Is it really okay to be so casual?" Then, Wu Ming pulled Ren to the seat and pressed him down. Mandela and the girl made some arrangements for the Salamandra members who were frightened by Wu Ming. Not long after, they arrived at the living room. After Mandela and the girl arrived at the living room, they walked to the main seat. Immediately afterward, as expected by Wu Ming, the person who sat in the main seat was the girl, not Mandela. Mandela stood beside the girl, acting as her second-in-command, advisor, or something like that. Following that, the leader of Salamandra, who was the host of the event, opened her mouth to speak. "Let me introduce myself first. I'm Shadora Turdurik. I'm the new leader of the Salamandra community. Please forgive our community members for offending you just now." The girl named Shadora looked apologetic. It seemed that Shadora had learned the reason for the incident when she went to deal with the Salamandra members who were frightened by Wu Ming. Although from the words of the Salamandra member, Wu Ming seemed to be the troublemaker, Shadora knew her own people well. She was afraid that things were not that simple. Moreover, from the conversation between the other party and White Yaksha, the relationship between the two seemed to be good. It was impossible for someone who could be looked up to by White Yaksha to be a sinister villain. Therefore, Shadora directly apologized to Wu Ming. "It's okay. I'm not a calculative person. The little lesson I gave them just now was enough." Wu Ming waved his hand, indicating that she did not need to take it to heart. This made Shadora smile. However, Mandela was not slow. "It's just no name. I let you in because of Lord White Yaksha. Don't push your luck." Mandela looked at Wu Ming angrily. "Brother Mandela, don't be like this." Shadora pulled Mandela's sleeve a little timidly. Through Shadora's words, Wu Ming knew that the two of them were brother and sister. Not only that, but Wu Ming also gleaned more information from these few words. Looking at Shadora's expression, it was likely that Salamandra and No Name's unilateral abandonment of the agreement was mainly due to Mandela's contribution. The treacherous fellow really has the guts to say such things. Lord Mandela of Salamandra. Wu Ming emphasized the word, Lord, and smiled, mocking Mandela quite powerfully. "You!" Mandela was furious. His hand instantly reached for the sword at his waist, looking like he wanted to go forward and slash Wu Ming. But then, a pair of golden vertical pupils stared at Mandela, causing Mandela to freeze on the spot. Without power, you can naturally be bullied by others at will. That is the law of all worlds and all regions. Wu Ming stared at Mandela with his golden pupils and said word by word. However, after the other party has power, it can't continue. Because then, those who take the initiative to bully will pay an irreversible price. The pressure released by Wu Ming gathered on Mandela. Not only was Mandela unable to move, but he was even close to death. "Brother Mandela? I'm sorry, Lord Villo. Please forgive my brother's rudeness. I'm leaving you." Shadora's first sentence was a surprise at Mandela's current state, and the last few sentences were pleading to Wu Ming. She even stood up and looked like she wanted to kneel. It was because she also sensed that Mandela was in danger at the moment. For her brother's life, there was nothing to hesitate about. However, when Shadora bent down, she found that she could not bend down anymore. It was as if she was held up by an invisible force. At this moment, White Yaksha, who had watched a lot of drama, spoke. "All right, Villo, give me some face." Hearing White Yaksha's words, Wu Ming's eyes turned from golden vertical pupils to the usual red pupils. The pressure on Mandela also disappeared. "Ah." Mandela, who felt relieved of a heavy burden, took a few steps back. He leaned against the wall when he almost fell, panting heavily. Ignoring Mandela, Wu Ming looked at Shadora. "I just taught our leader. Now I'll teach you, Shadora." As the leader of Salamandra, kneeling to the enemy because your family is being held hostage is a betrayal to Salamandra. Wu Ming reprimanded Shadora mercilessly. Then, Wu Ming removed the telekinesis on Shadora. Remember, before being your brother's sister, you have the identity of the leader of Salamandra. Shadora was a little down, but seeing that Wu Ming let her brother go, she nodded honestly. Yes, I understand, Lord Villo. Then, Wu Ming patted Ren, who heaved a sigh of relief. This gave Ren a fright. White Yaksha, since Salamandra doesn't welcome us for the time being, we'll leave for now. If there's anything, let Salamandra come to us with sincerity. With that, Wu Ming didn't give Shadora and White Yaksha a chance to speak. He pulled Ren and left Salamandra's meeting room. Really, this kid? White Yaksha shook her head helplessly, but she didn't say anything. After all, she didn't explain clearly that Salamandra, who unilaterally abandoned their alliance with no name, was the community that organized the Fire Dragon's birth ceremony. It was considered a dereliction of duty on White Yaksha's part. After Shadora saw Wu Ming leave, she quickly ran to Mandela, who was leaning against the wall. Brother Mandela, are you okay? Shadora helped Mandela up. She wanted to help her brother to the nearest leader's seat, but Mandela pushed her away forcefully. He wasn't the leader, so he couldn't sit on the leader's throne. That was the reflection of Mandela's heart. Mandela, who had a strong sense of self, wouldn't sit on the leader's seat. That was one of the few advantages of Mandela's annoying stubbornness. I didn't expect that such a person would join No Name. Mandela said with lingering fear. That's the result of your lack of judgment. You can't blame others, Mandela. White Yaksha opened the origami paper in a bad mood and habitually covered the lower half of her face. Fortunately, you really provoked him this time. Otherwise, I wouldn't have been able to save you. Mandela listened to White Yaksha's words and nodded slowly. I understand. I won't clash with that person again. I hope so. White Yaksha walked toward the door after she finished speaking. When White Yaksha turned around, Mandela's eyes showed a hint of conflicting worry and relief. Chapter 626. Wu Ming and Ren walked out of Salamandra's conference room. Along the way, no one from Salamandra stopped Wu Ming and Ren. It seemed that everyone in Salamandra knew how powerful this seemingly ordinary young man was. Then, Wu Ming and Ren came to the street. Some passers-by who saw what happened looked at Wu Ming in awe. The people of Salamandra were shocked by this powerhouse's inexplicable method, which made these passers-by respect him. But fortunately, because of this respect, these passers-by did not bother Wu Ming, which was what Wu Ming wanted to see. Then, Wu Ming made a suggestion. It's still early, let's walk around a little. Ren nodded. It was indeed quite early, so he was not in a hurry to find a hotel to rest. On the way, Wu Ming and Ren chatted casually. Ren, do you know Shadora? Ren was taken aback by Wu Ming's sudden question, but Ren immediately reacted and nodded his head. Yes, 3 years ago, before No Name was attacked by the Demon King, our community and Salamandra had worked together many times. In addition, Shadora and I are of the same age, so we knew each other. As Ren spoke, a smile appeared on his face as if he recalled the time when No Name met Shadora before she was attacked by the Demon King. But then, Ren's smile turned into a bitter smile. Wu Ming naturally understood the meaning behind it. It was nothing more than the same things, but people had changed. 3 years ago, the two of them were still living a carefree and peaceful life, but 3 years later, the two of them had become the leaders of their own community, and their respective communities had also experienced different degrees of attacks. Although Salamandra still had the ability to hold a large-scale festival, it could be seen that Salamandra was not as relaxed as it seemed on the surface from the fact that Shadora had become the leader of the Salamandra community. The changes that Salamandra had undergone in the past 2 years were not a joke. Moreover, when Salamandra invited White Yaksha to hold a festival together, it could be seen that the other party had some unspeakable difficulties. Suddenly, as if he had just reacted, Ren thanked Wu Ming. By the way, Mr. Villo, thank you for what you said to Shadora. These words were not only useful to Shadora, but also to Ren because both of them were unqualified leaders. Simply put, they were quite immature and still needed more training. It's nothing. I can also see that Shadora is not as scheming as her brother, so I chose to help her. He did not continue to attack Mandela was not only to give face to Yaksha, but also to help Shadora. Only Mandela and Shadora could be considered decent in the huge Salamandra. After all, Salamandra was a community that focused on group battles, and individual strength was not the priority. However, the two of them were only good in Salamandra. In No Name, not to mention Wuming and 16 Knights, Shadora might not even be able to win against Haruai Toshiaki and Jioyuki. No, it should be said that the immature Shadora was unlikely to be able to deal with Jioyuki, who grew up in a scheming environment, and Haruai Toshiaki, who came from the future with advanced ideas, unless Shadora was far stronger than the two of them. However, in Wuming's opinion, she did not have such strength. At most, Shadora would be able to suppress the two of them, and she did not have the strength to win. As for Mandela, it was hard to say. His shrewdness was deeper than Shadora, and even Haruai Toshiaki and Jioyuki. There was not much difference in strength, but in terms of intelligence, Mandela had a high chance of winning against the two of them. However, this was only Wuming's speculation. There was no absolute chance of winning, just like the Rick that Wuming knew. In Wuming's opinion, if he did not go to that world, Rick would have the possibility of overturning the war through his own efforts, although the possibility was quite slim. However, what humans did not lack the least was possibility, and this principle could also be used on Ren. Wuming thought so and looked at Ren, who was deep in thought. Mandela? Is he very scheming? Ren asked in confusion. Although Ren and Shadora did not have much contact with Mandela, in Ren's opinion, Mandela was just a rather strict person who did not want to shame his community. However, if Wuming knew Ren's thoughts, he would not know whether to laugh or cry. However, this was also a good thing about Ren. However, Wuming did not dare to compliment Mandela's unilateral breach of contract as not wanting to shame his community. In Wuming's opinion, this kind of behavior could only be done by people who only cared about profits. However, each person had their own opinion, so Wuming did not expect to persuade Ren. Wuming also began to patiently explain why Ren did not notice Mandela's scheming. How about this? I'll put it simply, Ren. Wuming thought for a moment. Shadora, the leader of Salamandra, is not scheming. You can see that, right? Facing Wuming's question, Ren nodded. In that case, Shadora must have a person who is the opposite of her. What Wuming said was the opposite. He was referring to scheming. Otherwise, Salamandra wouldn't have been able to stay in this 54545 outer gate as a 5-digit community. Ren had only become the leader after No Name had suffered a huge blow. The other communities had no interest in exploiting a community that did not have the slightest bit of profit. Otherwise, No Name would have disbanded a long time ago. How could they have lasted for 3 years? The situation of Salamandra was the same. Shadora became the leader, and Mandela dealt with the dark side for Shadora, who was ignorant of the world. Wuming even suspected that Mandela had other motives for inviting White Yaksha. However, there was insufficient information at the moment, so everything was just a guess. Immediately afterward, Wuming patted Ren's back and smiled slightly. You really have a lot to learn, leader. This made Ren more and more confused, but the considerate person did not continue to ask. Wuming ended the conversation with one sentence. Then, Wuming did not talk to Ren anymore. Instead, he sped up and began to wander around. The Fire Dragon Birth Festival in the North District this time was not for show. Exquisite glass art pieces were placed on the streets for pedestrians to admire. Coupled with the unique architectural style of the North District, not to mention those who had never been to the North District, even the locals of the North District were affected by the atmosphere before the festival began. Immediately afterward, Wuming looked at the huge red boundary wall in the distance. Salamandra, as the regional ruler and the outer door ruler of the outer door of the 54545, had the authority to make reasonable changes to the boundary wall. Now, There was a passage in the boundary wall that had been transformed into an exhibition corridor. It is said that there is an exhibition hall in the boundary wall. Let's go take a look together. Ren looked at Wu Ming looking at the boundary wall and suggested. Wu Ming, who had nothing to do, naturally would not reject and was about to nod in agreement. At that moment, there was an argument in the crowd. Chapter 627. The passers-by began to talk about it. Let's go, I heard you two is here. Are you for real? Seems like it's true. I heard there's you two on the roof over there. Why is you two on the roof? Why would the boxing aristocrats appear on the lower level? Don't worry about it, let's go and take a look. I haven't seen a boxing aristocrat yet. Wait for me. Me too, wait a minute, let's go together. Then, the passers-by began to move in a certain direction, probably to see the legendary Tuesday. Wu Ming and Ren did not move, because the two of them had completely heard the passers-by's conversation and were stunned on the spot. Wu Ming and Ren looked at each other and nodded. This so-called U2, if Wu Ming and Ren guessed correctly, should be Black Rabbit. I always feel like 16th Night and the others have done something troublesome again. Ren laughed dryly and complained. Sigh. Wu Ming sighed as well. It turned out that he and Ren were thinking the same thing. Although Wu Ming had been holed up in the library for a while, Wu Ming did not really become a shut-in. Wu Ming still knew some news about the outside world. Wu Ming still knew about things like, the competition venue was destroyed by a blonde man, the short-haired girl who was loved by animals and caused an animal version of the ghost parade, the girl with long, straight black hair caused a ruckus because someone spoke rudely to her. Wu Ming was worried that these three problem children would cause trouble, so after Black Rabbit chose to follow, he let Letitia follow as well. Letitia, who had recovered her strength, and Black Rabbit, who was not weak, should be able to keep these three problem children in check. In the end, Wu Ming still underestimated the ability of these problem children to cause trouble. I'll go take a look first, Ren, you can catch up later. Ren was stunned. However, Wu Ming didn't give Ren time to react. After he finished speaking, Wu Ming jumped and left Ren's side, heading towards the place where the crowd gathered. Wait a minute, Mr. Villo. However, Wu Ming had already arrived at the back of a crowd that had gathered inexplicably. Wu Ming raised his head and looked at the people on the two tall buildings in front of him. Reversing 16 Knights and Black Rabbit each occupied a tall building. They looked at each other as if they were two peerless experts. Sure enough, it's 16 Knights again. Wu Ming shook his head helplessly. Wu Ming guessed that it was 16 Knights in reverse. Among the three problem children, 16 Knights was the most difficult to deal with and also had the highest attribute of a problem child. However, at least now he couldn't see Jiao Fei Niao, Haraibu Yao, and Letitia's figures. The two who wanted to cause trouble were probably subdued by Letitia. What the hell is going on? Wasn't everything fine when I came here? Wu Ming already felt the horror of a problem child. Although Wu Ming was half a problem child, at least Wu Ming wouldn't cause trouble in the place where the ceremony was about to be held. At this time, Wu Ming sensed Letitia's location. At this moment, Letitia was very close to Wu Ming. After becoming Wu Ming's dependent, she was like a radar. Wu Ming could sense her location at any time. Since he already sensed Letitia's location, then he should go and take a look. At least I need to know what happened to make this happen. With this mentality, Wu Ming waved one hand, and the dark purple ripple swallowed Wu Ming like a giant mouth. This made the passers-by who accidentally saw it scared out of their wits. They couldn't even watch the fun and quickly left. In an alley where Black Rabbit and Reverse 16 Knights could be seen confronting each other, Letitia helplessly looked at Reverse 16 Knights and Black Rabbit who were standing on the roof. She then turned her head to look at the two people behind her. Of course, they were two of the three problem children, Jiao Fei Niao and Haraibu Yao. At this moment, the two of them were tied with a thin black string. Although the string was thin, Haraibu Yao tried to break free with the strength of an elephant, and the string was undamaged. Haraibu Yao's life catalog not only had the ability to communicate with animals, but also the ability to obtain the abilities of these animals, beasts, and beasts. For example, 2 days ago, it was said that Hurai Bu Yao participated in White Yiksha's gift competition and became friends with a griffin. He successfully obtained the ability to walk on air. It had to be said that this was an interesting gift. It was worthy of being called the highest grade of human gift. Wuming was also classified as a divine beast. If Hurai Bu Yao could obtain a part of Wuming's power, then it would be a huge gain. Not to mention being a tyrant in the Hakata world, Hurai Bu Yao could be considered an invincible existence in the middle and lower levels. Even in the upper levels of Hakata, Hurai Bu Yao could occupy a place. If that was the case, then 16 knights wouldn't be able to do anything to Hurai Bu Yao. However, it wouldn't be that easy to obtain abilities from Wuming. As for how to do it, no one knew. Back to the main topic, Letitia looked at Jiao Fei Niao and Hurai Bu Yao and began to criticize and educate them. Can't you 3 problem children be more honest? Even if you don't think for the benevolent master, you should think for Black Rabbit. Look at how angry Black Rabbit was just now. Letitia puffed up her cheeks and was quite angry. However, in the eyes of others, it was more cute than angry. Okay, we were wrong. As the saying goes, people under the eaves have to bow their heads. Jiao Fei Niao and Hurai Bu Yao obediently bowed their heads and admitted their mistakes. Then Hurai Bu Yao and Jiao Fei Niao began to chat. I didn't expect Letitia to be so strong. Hurai Bu Yao said with jealousy. Why? Because she was caught in an instant. That's right. We didn't see anyone, but this black rope caught the 2 of us in an instant. If it wasn't for 16 knights being smart, we would have been caught too. Jiao Fei Niao looked angrily at the black rope that tied her up like a shadow. Although I lost my divine spark, becoming the master's dependent has greatly increased my power. I'm not any weaker than when I had my divine spark. In fact, I'm even slightly stronger. It's more than enough to catch the 2 of you. Letitia looked as if she was proud of being Wuming's dependent, with a smile on her small face. Tisk, X2, it's useless. The master is already here. You disobedient problem children, I'll let the master deal with you later. Letitia smiled at the 2 of them. Jiao Fei Niao and Hurai Bu Yao didn't want to admit defeat and turned their heads away. At this time, Wuming's voice was heard. You 2 are quite stubborn. Chapter 628. Master. Letitia bowed to Wuming, who walked out from the shadows to show her respect. Wuming waved his hand casually. Although Wuming had told Letitia many times that there was no need to bow to him every time she saw him, Letitia was still stubborn and had to bow to Wuming every time she saw him. After a while, Wuming gave up on persuading Letitia. After all, she wouldn't lose anything by bowing, right? At this time, Jiuyuko and Haruai Hibakushi, who had turned their heads away, turned their heads back. Villo, we are on the same side, right? Haruai Hibakushi looked at Wuming stubbornly. Let us go. Jiuyuko didn't hold back and shouted at Wuming angrily. Then I'm sorry. Let's not talk about Jiuyuko's attitude first. Wuming shrugged and walked in front of Jiuyuko and Haruai Hibakushi. About the problem of being on the same side, I don't think I'm on the same side as you. Traitor. Shameless. Jiuyuko and Haruai Hibakushi looked like they were betrayed by a traitor. If a passerby who didn't know the situation saw it, they would probably think that it was a tragic drama where 2 righteous girls were betrayed by a man who was supposed to be on the same side as them. If Wuming knew what the 2 of them were like, he would even have a feeling of, could it be that I'm really a traitor and betrayed them? But there was no if. Wuming stretched out his hands and hit Jiuyuko and Haruai Hibakushi on the forehead with lightning speed. Ouch, 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 ouch. Jiuyuko couldn't help but tear up. Ouch. Although Haruai Hibakushi didn't seem to be in much pain, his slightly wet eyes proved that he wasn't as relaxed as he looked. Then can you tell me now? What did you guys do to end up like this? However, after Jiao Yuasuka and Kasuga Biyao were humiliated by their enemies, their beliefs became even more firm. They were truly unyielding and indomitable. Rejected. Ditto. After the 2 of them finished speaking, they turned their heads to the side again. However, as captives, the two of them had no right to speak. Looks like you won't confess if I don't do something ruthless. Wu Ming smiled. However, this smile made Jio Yuasuke and Kasumi's hearts tremble. Their bodies couldn't help but tremble. However, this wasn't enough to convince them. Wu Ming, who knew this, looked at Letitia. How about this, Letitia, you come with me. Let's play with the two of them. What do you think? Wu Ming said as his hands moved, as if he was stretching his muscles and bones. As long as you're happy, master. Letitia nodded with a smile, indicating that she would accompany Wu Ming. But wait a minute, I'm a lady. How can you torture a lady? Don't you dare. Jio Yuasuke and Kasuga Biao saw that Wu Ming didn't seem to be joking. The two of them immediately panicked. Scared? Sorry, it's too late. Then Wu Ming smiled mischievously. Instantly, chains appeared out of thin air. Then, the chains hung Jio Yuasuke and Kasuga Biao up. Their hands were placed horizontally, and their bodies were upright as if Jesus was being tortured. At the same time, the black rope that Letitia tied to the two of them disappeared. Then, Wu Ming wrote a few runes in the air that they couldn't understand and slapped the runes in the air. This was a Lune rune technique with a soundproof effect. Then, Wu Ming snapped his fingers, and two feathers appeared out of thin air. Wu Ming said as he handed one of the feathers to Letitia. Come, Letitia. Letitia nodded and took the feather. Then, she walked with Wu Ming to Jio Yuasuke and Kasuga Biao who were hung up. Then, under the two's despairing gaze, Wu Ming took off their shoes. About a few minutes later, Wu Ming twisted his waist and moved his body twice. I didn't expect you guys to be so strong. Wu Ming looked at Jio Yuasuke and Kasuga Biao who had taken off their shoes. Their clothes were drenched in sweat, and they were panting as if they had just run a few thousand meters. There was also San Mao Cat who wanted to hug Wu Ming's leg to show her loyalty to her master. In the end, she was hung up by Wu Ming's pseudo-heavenly lock. We won't submit, no. That's right. Although the two said so, the exhaustion in their eyes and bodies told them that they couldn't go on anymore. Forget it, I'm not playing anymore. Wu Ming threw away the feather and looked at Letitia who also threw the feather to the ground. Tell me what's going on, Letitia. Jio Yuasuke and Kasuga Biao froze. That's right, Letitia knows what happened. Why didn't you ask her earlier? But Wu Ming kindly explained to the two. Wouldn't that be boring? Then, Jio Yuasuke and Kasuga Biao glared at Wu Ming with murderous eyes. But Wu Ming just shrugged happily. Letitia sighed helplessly. That's the punishment for this mess. Letitia looked at Jio Yuasuke and Kasuga Biao with pity. Then, Letitia told Wu Ming the whole story. When the three problem children left the Thousand Eyes branch to go shopping, Ryu Yuasuke and Letitia followed them. Perhaps it was because of the supervisor. The three problem children were quite well behaved in the beginning and didn't cause any trouble. But problem children were still problem children. After shopping for a while, the three problem children began to rely on the people in the downtown area to play hide and seek with Ryu Yuasuke and Letitia. Because the three problem children were honest at first, Ryu Yuasuke and Letitia relaxed a little. As a result, Ryu Yuasuke and Letitia couldn't find the three problem children. But thankfully, the two of them still managed to find 16 knights and the other two. They were on top of an extremely tall art building, looking at the scenery outside the 54,545 gate. This caused a commotion among the pedestrians. After all, the building the three problem children were in was a rare piece of art. Knowing that the problem children caused trouble again, Ryu Yuasuke and Letitia began to capture the problem children. 16 knights ran away quickly, while Jio Yuasuke ran away because of her poor physical fitness. When Kasuga Biao was about to leave with Jio Yuasuke, the two of them were tied up by Letitia with a shadow rope. One of Letitia's gifts, Dragon's Shadow. It was one of Letitia's gifts that had many uses. Wings, weapons, shields, stealth cover, it could be said to be very versatile. And Letitia's strength had recovered to 4 digits. Along with Kasuga Biao who was half a beat slower because of taking care of Jio Yuasuke, The two of them were caught together by Letitia. 16 Knights and Ryu Yuasuke, on the other hand, were in the same situation as before. Chapter 629. After I caught Miss Asuka and Miss Yao, I was following Black Rabbit and 16 Knights in the dark. However, they were too fast, so I couldn't catch up with them. Letitia was referring to small alleys like this one. After that, Master, you came over. Letitia finished her sentence. Wu Ming knew what happened after that, although there wasn't anything else. I understand. Thank you for your hard work, Letitia. Wu Ming patted Letitia's head. Letitia, on the other hand, looked like she was enjoying it. It had to be said that if Letitia's current lowly state and her current expression were seen by those Lolicons, who knew how much cuteness they would have. Although Wu Ming wasn't a Lolicon, Wu Ming had no self-control when it came to cute Lolis. Beast. Pervert. That was what Gyo Asuka and Hirai Hikari said when they saw Wu Ming's happy expression. You two are really energetic. Wu Ming narrowed his eyes and turned to look at Gyo Asuka and Hirai Hikari. This reminded the two of them of the fear of having their souls controlled by feathers. Snap. Wu Ming snapped his fingers, and the silver chains that bound Gyo Asuka and Hirai Hikari were released. With a clattering sound, the chains returned to the ripples at the top. Gyo Asuka fell to the ground on her butt and made a sound of pain. Although Hirai Hikari also fell to the ground on his but like Gyo Asuka, Hirai Hikari's physical fitness was much higher than Gyo Asuka's, so she didn't feel much pain. However, because of Wu Ming's punishment, the two didn't have much strength at the moment. Otherwise, Hirai Hikari wouldn't have fallen to the ground on his butt. At the same time, Sanmao, who was released by Wu Ming, jumped into Hirai Hikari's arms and meowed worriedly. Then, Wu Ming walked to the two who were sitting on the ground. Gyo Asuka and Hirai Hikari looked at Wu Ming's shadow and couldn't help but tremble. Even Sanmao's fur stood on end. Then, Wu Ming personally helped the two of them put on their shoes while Gyo Yuasuke and Hirai Hikari looked on in surprise and embarrassment. Wu Ming clapped his hands and stood up. What happened just now is just a lesson from this time's trouble. Even if you're a problem child, you still have to remember the occasion. Don't do it again. Wu Ming's tone was quite gentle, just like a big brother next door. Furthermore, Wu Ming had personally helped them put on their shoes. This made Jiuyuki and Hirai Hikari blush. Then Wu Ming looked. Letitia, look after them. I'll go check on 16th Knights and Black Rabbit. Yes, Master. After Letitia nodded, Wu Ming waved his hand. A dark purple ripple appeared and engulfed Wu Ming. After watching Wu Ming leave, Letitia walked to Gyo Asuka and Hirai Hikari and stretched out her hands. The ground is cold. Get up, you. Although Gyo Asuka and Hirai Hikari wanted to get up by themselves, they didn't have much strength left because of Wu Ming and Letitia's antics. Gyo Asuka and Hirai Hikari had no choice but to hold Letitia's hand and stand up. How is it? Master is very gentle, right? Letitia's sudden words made Gyo Asuka and Hirai Hikari, who were patting the dust off themselves, blush. They recalled the scene where Wu Ming helped them put on their shoes. He's just a lecher. That guy treated me like that. Even if it's a punishment, I'll remember it. Gyo Asuka glared at Letitia. Letitia had also attacked her just now. Gyo Asuka remembered it clearly. Unforgivable. Hirai Hikari hugged Sanmao, who was already out of breath, with a face full of displeasure. However, their reactions were seen as shyness in Letitia's eyes. It could only be said that giving carrots with carrots was very effective, wasn't it? Let's go, Hirai Hikari, Gyo Asuka said politely to Hirai Hikari. After Hirai Hikari nodded, Gyo Asuka and Hirai Hikari looked like they were about to leave. What? You two still want to run? Aren't you afraid of Master's punishment? Letitia looked at the two with a smile. The two trembled. They definitely didn't want to go through that kind of hell again. However, Gyo Asuka thought about it again and smiled at Letitia. Villo only asked you to watch over us. He didn't say that we can't leave, Letitia. Gyo Asuka called Letitia intimately. Although it was a play on words, Letitia knew that Gyo Asuka and Hirai Hikari wouldn't cause any more trouble. Moreover, with her around, they wouldn't be able to cause any trouble. If that's the case, then fine. Just like that, Letitia followed Gyo Asuka and Hirai Hikari in the opposite direction of 16 Nights and Black Rabbit. Gyo Asuka and Hirai Hikari really wanted to have a good time shopping. After all, if they were interrupted in the middle of shopping, it would be very unpleasant. While Letitia, Gyo Asuka, and Hirai Hikari were shopping, at the tall building where 16 Nights and Black Rabbit were before, a dark purple ripple appeared on one of the tall buildings, and Wuming appeared from it. Why was it where they were before? It was because the two of them were no longer there. Seems like I was having too much fun with Gyo Asuka and Hikari. Where did 16 Nights and Black Rabbit go? Wuming scratched his head. Dong! Suddenly, a loud sound was heard from somewhere not far away. Wuming turned around and saw that the top of a clock tower had broken for some unknown reason, and the big bell on the clock tower had fallen along with it. With his excellent eyesight, Wuming saw 16 Nights and Black Rabbit falling along with the top of the clock tower. Needless to say, the clock tower's destruction must have been done by 16 Nights. The big bell, along with a large number of small and large stones, fell onto the street, causing panic among the onlookers on the street. It should be said that it was impossible not to panic because the stones were falling directly onto the crowd. The people below the clock tower started to panic as they scurried in all directions. However, due to the height of the clock tower and the fact that the residents of the box court world were people who could easily accept sudden surprises, it only took a few seconds for the crowd to evacuate. However, if the stones and the top of the clock tower were allowed to fall, even if it did not cause any casualties, it would definitely cause damage to the street. Geez, always giving people trouble. Wuming shook his head helplessly. Immediately after, the falling bell tower and stones seemed to have been frozen in midair. Chapter 630. The residents who retreated to the surrounding safe area looked at the strange scene of the bell tower being fixed in midair, and they all discussed in surprise. What's going on? I don't know. Could it be a gift from a powerhouse? I don't know, but this disaster is stopped. Thank God. Wuming used his telekinesis to fly to the side of the falling object that was controlled by his telekinesis. Looking at the wreckage, Wuming was even more certain that this was 16 Nights' masterpiece. There was no pattern, and the traces of destruction were obvious. Other than 16 Nights, Silent Cries didn't think that there was anyone else who could be like a berserker. Wuming had a way to recreate a replacement on the top of the bell tower with advanced item creation, but it wasn't easy. He had to let Wuming analyze the structure of the bell tower. If only Kalis was here. Wuming sighed. Wuming recognized the importance of Kalis more than once. If Kelly was here, it would only take a second for Silent Wonder to complete the scan. Silent Wonder would then be able to use his advanced item creation. But after all, Kalis was now with his original body, and his original body was nowhere to be found. It could only be said that things didn't go as planned. However, Wuming wasn't a pessimistic person, so he didn't dwell on this issue. Let's talk about the repair later. Wuming looked at Black Rabbit and 16 Nights who had landed on the ground below. With the strength of the two, they naturally wouldn't die from falling from a high altitude, and it was naturally even more impossible for them to be injured. The two landed safely on the ground, but there was a strange thing. They were holding each other's arms. Moreover, there was a contract document. It seemed that the two had made some kind of bet. However, it looked like it was a tie because both of them looked unhappy at the moment. Wuming landed directly below. Before reaching the ground, Wuming heard the complaints of 16 Nights. I absolutely can't accept it. It's obvious that my side is faster. 16 Nights, who had never lost in games, was very unhappy about the draw. Boxing's judgment won't be wrong. If you have any opinions, you can appeal, but the result won't change. Black Rabbit was quite satisfied with the result of the draw. Anyway, her goal had been achieved. From the point of being able to issue any order to 16 Nights unconditionally, Black Rabbit had already profited. Being able to make a problem child obey an order, no matter how you think about it, isn't it? Wait for me, you two. Wu Ming interrupted at the right time. Yo, isn't this little brother? What a coincidence. When 16 Knights saw Wu Ming, it was as if all the previous unhappiness had disappeared. Do you want to have a match with me? The winner will get the chance to give orders to the other party. However, Wu Ming pointed behind him. You guys deal with them first. Wu Ming's tone was full of helplessness. Black Rabbit and 16 Knights looked behind Wu Ming, but the problem was that there was nothing. Above. Wu Ming kindly reminded. Black Rabbit and Reverse 16 Knights raised their heads and saw a group of flying dragon subspecies descending towards them. Among them, at the forefront, there was a man who didn't ride a dragon. That was Wu Ming's old friend, the scheming man, Mandela. What is that? The straightforward 16 Knights expressed that he didn't know what those people were doing. That's the military police belonging to Salamandra. Black Rabbit showed an expression of being finished. That is to say, they are here to catch us. 16 Knights had a burning look on his face. Please don't be so happy, Mr. 16 Knights. We've gotten into quite a big mess. Black Rabbit was mad at 16 Knights' cheerful and optimistic attitude. More than once, Black Rabbit had the urge to strangle 16 Knights to death. We are finished this time. Black Rabbit bent down dejectedly, looking like he had lost his life. You two don't talk later, I will deal with this old friend. Wu Ming looked at the approaching Mandela and said to Black Rabbit and 16 Knights without looking back. Oh, this is going to be interesting. 16 Knights' reversal looked like he was waiting to watch a good show. He naturally understood what Wu Ming meant by old friend. Mr. Villo, do you know the people from Salamandra? Black Rabbit obviously didn't understand that Wu Ming's old friend was derogatory. In short, don't talk. As soon as Wu Ming finished speaking, the military police from Salamandra landed. Thieves in front, don't move. Mandela acted as if he didn't know Wu Ming and roared at Black Rabbit and 16 Knights behind Wu Ming. But Mandela's words actually included Wu Ming. Wu Ming narrowed his eyes. It seemed that this guy was a little more powerful than Wu Ming thought. But it's just a little bit more powerful. Give me some face, Mandela. The two behind are my people. There are no casualties in this incident, and I will personally fix the clock tower. How about it? Wu Ming said, his whole body exuding a dangerous aura. This aura made the flying dragon subspecies ridden by the Salamandra military police feel uneasy and began to become restless. But the Salamandra military police also had some skills, and none of the flying dragon subspecies were out of control. Black Rabbit also felt Wu Ming's strong aura. Although Wu Ming did it for them, he was a little uneasy. After all, they were outsiders. They caused trouble in other people's territory, and their attitude was so tough in the end. It was inevitable that people would feel uneasy. However, for Wu Ming, his companions were the most important. As long as they didn't make any big mistakes, if Wu Ming had the ability, he wouldn't mind covering up for his companions. After all, you couldn't expect a problem child to correct his mistakes. Therefore, weakness was the original sin. This was still the case where Wu Ming gave face to the other party. If it was White Yiksha's people who caused such a disaster, Mandela would probably turn a blind eye. Wu Ming's request with a threatening attitude made Mandela very uncomfortable, but he already knew that the other party was a powerhouse who was not weaker than White Yiksha, so his attitude needed to be slightly changed. As early as when he rushed over, he saw Wu Ming with this group of criminals, so they must be a group. But since the military police had already come out, there was no reason to return without any results. It would be too embarrassing. However, it was still possible to turn a blind eye to it now. As suspects, the two of them must go to Salamandra with our military police. Without any superfluous words, Mandela put forward his bottom line. Of course. Wu Ming nodded. Since the other party gave him face, Wu Ming naturally wouldn't refuse. Letting Black Rabbit and 16 Knights go back with Salamandra was a small punishment for the two. Although it was impossible to learn from going back to the 16 Knights, it was impossible. Then please. Chapter 631. Wu-ming brought Black Rabbit and 16 knights with him and followed Mandela's military police to Salamandra's base. Wu-ming didn't care about the destruction of the bell towers that were fixed in the air by Wu-ming's telekinesis. This became the scene of the fire dragon's birth ceremony, attracting many people to come and see the falling objects hanging in the air. It could be considered a blessing in disguise. With Wu-ming's telekinesis, it wouldn't affect anything if he just controlled the falling objects from Salamandra's base. Therefore, Wu-ming didn't care about it for the time being. Let the falling objects stay in the air and deal with the matter in front of him first. Salamandra's conference room, on the wide rectangular conference table. Shadora sat at the head of the table, Mandela sat on Shadora's left, and White Yaksha sat on Shadora's right. On both sides of the three sat a few higher-ups of Salamandra, but it was obvious that they were all gathered together. When Wu-ming first met White Yaksha, only Shadora and Mandela accompanied him. In other words, only Mandela and Shadora were the real higher-ups, and the others weren't considered higher-ups. Or rather, they were Mandela's trusted aides. And for this meeting with no name, Mandela pulled a few of his trusted aides over. After all, when facing no name, only Shadora and Mandela were there. It was inevitable that it would be rude. From Mandela's point of view, among the two powerhouses present, White Yaksha was obviously leaning towards no name, and Wu-ming was completely on the side of no name, so he had to treat no name with caution. Even if Mandela looked down on the other side as a community, Mandela still had to be polite. On the seat opposite Shadora, Ren, the leader of no name, sat there. On the way here with Salamandra, Wu-ming and the others happened to see Ren with a helpless and slightly panicked face, so Wu-ming brought their leader over. However, inexplicably starting a meeting with Salamandra made Ren quite nervous. The other members of No Name sat on both sides of Ren. On Ren's left was Wu-ming, and on his right was 16 knights. It had to be said that 16 knights, as a suspect, was able to sit here was thanks to Wu-ming. Otherwise, with Mandela who looked down on no name, 16 knights who was of low birth and caused trouble, would be punished by Mandela. Although Mandela would probably be taught a lesson by 16th knight, immediately on 16 knights' right side sat Jio Yuasu and Sat. Good heavens, this is a group of problem children. Although Jio Yuasu ants brought Letitia to go shopping, when Wu-ming found Ren, he also found the three of them. After all, it was not easy for the members of No Name to gather, so Wu-ming did not give Jio Yuasu ants a chance to go shopping. Instead, he let Letitia bring the two of them to follow Wu-ming to Salamandra base. After all, No Name still had to talk with Salamandra. As for Letitia and Black Rabbit, they sat on Wu-ming's left side. Although Black Rabbit and 16 knights got into trouble together, but with the name of Hakata nobility, even Mandela did not want to pursue the responsibility of Black Rabbit as a moon rabbit. It had to be said that the Hakata nobility, the moon rabbit race, was really a jack of all trades in the Hakata world. No matter who it was, they would have respect for the moon rabbit race. Therefore, even if Black Rabbit was a member of No Name, Salamandra still easily forgave her. Finally, there was Letitia. Although Letitia considered herself as Wu-ming's maid in No Name, but to outsiders, no one would think of Letitia as a maid. If a tiger was full, it would not hurt you, but would you really dare to sleep next to a tiger? You would be scared to death. This analogy was very apt for Letitia. Even if Letitia was a maid, they would only think that it was the bad taste of the owner who owned Letitia. They would not dare to really see Letitia as a maid. Let's not talk about ordering her around. If you let a 4-digit person stand in front of Salamandra, a 5-digit person, listen to people talk, even if Letitia would agree, would Salamandra dare to do so? A 4-digit person was a 4-digit person, belonging to the upper echelons of Hakata. As a 4-digit person, Letitia completely had the qualifications to sit next to Wu-ming. And Letitia also understood this principle, so under Wu-ming's instructions, she sat next to Wu-ming. Seeing that everyone was present, as the host, Shadora spoke. Regarding the destruction of the sacrificial bell tower by Mr. 16 Knights and Miss Black Rabbit, because there were no casualties and the street was not damaged, Salamandra decided not to pursue the matter. However, the price is that No Name will be responsible for repairing the damaged bell tower. Does No Name have any objections? Shadora first made a ruling on the disaster caused by the actions of Black Rabbit and 16 Knights. But as Shadora said, because there were basically no losses, No Name only needed to repair the bell tower. In this regard, Mandela had no objections. After all, even if he didn't give face to No Name, he had to give face to White Yaksha and Wuming, right? One was the person who led No Name here, and the other was a powerful person in the No Name community. Even if he wanted to throw a tantrum, he had to hold it in. No Name has no objections to Salamandra's decision. This sentence was said by Ren. After all, if the communication between communities was not spoken by someone other than Ren, it would inevitably cause the community to lose face. Wuming and 16 Knights knew this, so they didn't speak. However, when 16 Knights saw Ren's body trembling slightly due to nervousness, he gently patted Ren's back. Ren glanced at 16 Knights, and under 16 Knights' trusting smile, Ren gradually overcame his fear. With a big brother, like 16 Knights, Wuming didn't need to comfort Ren. The problem of Black Rabbit and 16 Knights' destruction had come to an end, so next should be the main event. Then, regarding the birth of the Fire Dragon and the Demon King's attack, do you have any preparations? Wuming took the lead to open the door to this topic, but this surprised Ren and Black Rabbit. Mr. Villa, why did you? Black Rabbit wanted to say something but stopped. Clearly, Black Rabbit was concerned about why Wuming exposed this information. Because Salamandra must have known about this long ago. Am I right, White Yaksha? Chapter 632. Wuming said as he looked at White Yaksha. Villo is right. The higher-ups of Salamandra already know about this. White Yaksha nodded slowly. This wasn't hard to understand. After all, the Fire Dragon's birth ceremony was organized by White Yaksha and Salamandra together. It didn't make sense that White Yaksha knew about the Demon King's attack, but Salamandra didn't. After White Yaksha knew about the prophecy of the Demon King's attack, he first looked for the organizer of the Fire Dragon's birth ceremony, Salamandra. However, in order to not cause panic, very few people in Salamandra knew about this. It should be said that the only people in Salamandra who knew about this were Shadora, Mandela, and a few of Mandela's trusted aides. Because of this, the members of Salamandra did not show any signs of surprise. However, a few of Mandela's trusted aides were surprised by Wuming's bluntness in revealing the secret. No matter what, the Fire Dragon's birth ceremony and the Demon King's attack was already a secret. If others heard about it, it would be troublesome. In the worst case, the Fire Dragon's birth ceremony would be destroyed before it was even held. However, since you know that the Demon King's attack will happen during the Fire Dragon's birth ceremony, why don't you just cancel the ceremony? Jiao Yuanfei asked. That's right. The Demon King's attack was so serious that people would die. So why continue to hold the ceremony? Was it because of a matter of reputation? After all, canceling the ceremony would affect the reputation of the community. Of course it's not that simple, thief. White Yaksha explained to Jiao Yuanfei. Although in the eyes of others, Salamandra was completely capable of bearing the price of a failed Fire Dragon's birth ceremony, no one wanted to lose out. Furthermore, it would be foolish to choose his own reputation in such a situation. White Yaksha could not hold the ceremony with such a community. If that was the case, White Yaksha would have left long ago. However, White Yaksha's words made everyone feel awkward. Although canceling the ceremony is the wisest choice under such circumstances, the reason why Salamandra didn't cancel the ceremony is really related to its reputation. White Yaksha's words stunned No Name, including Wuming and 16 Knights. They really didn't think that it was really a matter of reputation this time. Then, Wuming looked at White Yaksha, who was looking at them with mischievous interest. In other words, Salamandra cannot be cancelled, or rather, it cannot be cancelled. We must continue with this ceremony, Wuming suddenly said. If I'm not wrong, The reason why it can't be cancelled should be related to the name of the fire dragon birth ceremony. At this moment, 16th Knights reacted in time and followed Wu Ming's words. That's right. The fire dragon birth ceremony is a celebration for Shadora's birth, so it can't be cancelled. Mandela nodded. However, Black Rabbit and the others couldn't understand Mandela's words. It was a rare celebration to commemorate Shadora's birth. Couldn't it be cancelled? Shadora wasn't some super powerful or super famous big shot. If only it was really a ceremony for Shadora's birth. Wu Ming shook his head. White Yaksha spoke again. Shadora inherited the position of the leader of the Salamandra community and also inherited the position of the North District's Stratum ruler. Stratum ruler? This shocked Black Rabbit, Rin, Jo Yuasuka, and Kasumi. Could it be that Shadora, who looked so young and weak, was a super strong being? After all, if she wasn't a powerhouse, she wouldn't be able to inherit the position of the Stratum ruler and protect the North District. The Stratum ruler in the North District isn't what you think it is. Wu Ming interrupted their shock. The Stratum ruler in the North District is a position inherited by many people. Basically, they are some regional Stratum rulers and outer sect Stratum rulers. How did Mr. Villo know? Black Rabbit was confused. Wu Ming was clearly acting like an otaku during this period. How could he know more than a local like her? The underground library of No Name recorded that the Stratum rulers in the North District have always been like this. This made everyone understand once again that knowledge was power. Mr. Villo is right. In order to help Shadora consolidate her position as one of the Stratum rulers, this fire dragon birth ceremony must continue. It can't be stopped, White Yaksha added. It's because the other Stratum rulers in the North District aren't willing to help this little girl hold the fire dragon birth ceremony together. That's why we were invited by Salamandra to hold the fire dragon birth ceremony together. Although it sounded a little cruel, it seemed to be a matter of course. An 11-year-old girl who hadn't even reached adulthood yet sat directly in the seat that the upper class had spent a lot of effort to sit in. Anyone would feel that it was unfair. Moreover, because of the harsh environment in the North District, the other Stratum rulers in the North District were people who wouldn't wake up early if there were no benefits. Therefore, they directly rejected Shadora's invitation. That was something that couldn't be helped. Of course, the so-called wouldn't wake up early if there were no benefits was only compared to the East District. It wasn't that bad. It was just a little evil compared to the East District. After all, if there were so many kind-hearted people, the Stratum rulers wouldn't have been able to develop to their current level in the North District. And they wouldn't have been able to discover that the Stratum rulers wouldn't be able to become Stratum rulers because they didn't have any backing. It was impossible for them to become Stratum rulers with their own strength. It could only be said that the strong preyed on the weak. Just like Mandela. Although he was quite ruthless to others, he still loved his Stratum rulers. Just like how he treated No Name. Because continuing to form an alliance with a nameless Stratum ruler would damage his reputation, he directly kicked No Name away. This was the law of the jungle. No Name was weak and wasn't qualified to be their ally. So, out of good intentions, White Yaksha organized the festival with the people from the North District. After all, due to the distance, cross-district cooperation festivals weren't common. Therefore, they were puzzled when they learned that White Yaksha was holding a festival with the people from the North District. Now, everyone understood why White Yaksha would suddenly cross districts to hold a festival with people from other districts. You're really a good person, White Yaksha. 16 Knights praised White Yaksha with a laugh. However, the praise of a problematic child made White Yaksha's hair stand on end. Then, White Yaksha continued the topic. Since Salamandra can't cancel the festival, we can only find another way. If retreat doesn't work, then we'll fight head-on. This was what White Yaksha meant. Chapter 633. In other words, you've chosen the path of dealing with the Demon King, right? 16 Knights said casually as he leaned back in his seat. But that's a demon king. Black Rabbit seemed to recall what happened to No Name 3 years ago, and his face darkened. Isn't that simple? If a demon king attacks and doesn't choose to retreat, then just find a powerhouse who can definitely kill the demon king. Wu Ming's tone was also quite casual. And coincidentally, White Yaksha, the ruler of the East District's hierarchy who organized the Fire Dragon's birth ceremony with Salamandra, is such a powerhouse. Am I right, White Yaksha? With that, Wu Ming looked at White Yaksha. That's right. White Yaksha suddenly opened his fan and made a classic White Yaksha pose of covering the lower half of his face with his fan. Because Lord White Yaksha is known to be the strongest among the lower ranks, so with Lord White Yaksha in charge, we, Salamandra, are very assured. Shadora continued White Yaksha's words. Hearing Shadora's words, White Yaksha seemed to be quite proud, with a proud smile on his face, and puffed out his chest. But the lowly was still a lowly without a chest. Therefore, it was precisely because Salamandra knew the strength of his ally, White Yaksha, that it was impossible for a demon king to be able to defeat White Yaksha. Therefore, after Salamandra learned of this news, he did not cancel the Fire Dragon's birth ceremony. Instead, he asked his ally, White Yaksha, to help him deal with the unknown demon king. And White Yaksha, whether it was out of responsibility as the ruler of the hierarchy or because of their relationship as allies, White Yaksha would help. Then you came to us for insurance, right, White Yaksha? After Wu Ming knew what had happened, he understood why White Yaksha asked No Name to join the Fire Dragon's birth ceremony when it was about to begin. At first, everyone's guess was not wrong. No Name had the slogan to defeat the Demon King and was a community that specialized in fighting the Demon King. Therefore, White Yaksha chose No Name. But there was a more important reason, and that was insurance. Previously, when White Yaksha was looking for No Name, Wu Ming was showing off his power to White Yaksha. He said, "When you come into contact with the Demon King, that Demon King will be defeated by us, the ruler of the strongest class." He had said something to White Yaksha. Since they dared to attack the ceremony despite knowing that you were there, they must have a way to deal with you. You must have thought of this, which is why you came to us, right? Wu Ming repeated. Of course. I am confident, but I am not conceited. The situation you speak of is naturally within my consideration. White Yaksha revealed a hint of pride. This made Ren, Black Rabbit, and Shadora, who were more gullible, look at White Yaksha with admiration. This made Wu Ming smile helplessly. She didn't know if it was because of her current lowly state, but by Yasha was a little childish. Actually, I didn't have much hope for No Name. At this moment, Mandela suddenly spoke and attracted everyone's attention. But since No Name has someone like Servillo, it's naturally not a problem to be invited by White Yaksha Sama. After personally witnessing Wu Ming's power, Mandela respected Wu Ming. As a member of the Northern District, he didn't have the slightest resistance to the weak respecting the strong, even if Wu Ming was someone he offended and taught a lesson to. However, Mandela's words made the 3 problem children, 16 Knights, Flying Bird, and Yao, unhappy. He said it as if they only needed Wu Ming and didn't need anyone else. How could the extremely conceited 3 problem children calm down? In other words, you think that No Name completely relies on Villo? Jiuan Flying Bird crossed her arms and looked at Mandela. Although Villo's contribution to No Name is not small, we are not weak, Kurai Hiroyuki said with a frown. You bastard, do you want to try my fist? Reverse 16 Knights said, revealing his fist. No need, No Name only needs to send Servillo. Mandela directly rejected the 3 problem children's request. In his opinion, these people were just weaklings who only knew how to cause trouble and weren't worthy of his attention. However, if they wanted to offend him, he didn't mind teaching them a lesson. As a result, Mandela's words angered the 3 problem children. Then why don't you have a taste of our power? 16 Knights laughed. After 16 Knights finished speaking, Haruai Hiroyuki, who was already prepared, stepped on the air and instantly rushed towards Mandela. Mandela, who was already prepared, pulled out the sword at his waist and prepared to meet the opponent's attack. Suddenly, a spell was chanted, and Mandela felt that he couldn't move. Stop for me. Juyuan Flying Bird's eyes were like an eagle's as she stared at Mandela. Fortunately, this power only lasted for a second before it disappeared. Mandela thought that he had broken free, but in fact, it was just Juyuan Flying Bird canceling her control over Mandela. After learning about her gift, Juyuan Flying Bird's ability improved greatly in just one night, as if she had an epiphany, and 1 second was enough for her to control Mandela. This was because 1 second was enough for Harai Hiroyuki to achieve his goal. Bang! In an instant, Mandela was directly sent flying by Harai Hiroyuki's kick and hit the wall. Harai Hiroyuki did a somersault in the air and stood gracefully on the table. What? This shocked Shadora and the higher-ups of Salamandra, who were Mandela's confidants. Smoke and dust filled Mandela's body as he struggled to stand up and looked at Harai Hiroyuki with some anger. No name. Mandela roared. Then, Mandela's pupils began to dilate involuntarily because 16 knights had already rushed in front of him and raised his ordinary fist. However, this ordinary fist gave Mandela a sense of danger and even death, which was why Mandela's pupils shrank. That's enough, boy. Suddenly, Byakuya spoke, and 16 knights' fists stopped in front of Mandela. Boom! This was the sound of the impact caused by 16 knights' fist. Although it stopped in time, the strong airflow still hit Mandela's hair and clothes, making rustling sounds. Then, the wall behind Mandela collapsed. Rumble! Chapter 634. Half and half. White Yaksha waved the fan in front of him. It's embarrassing for me to participate in the event in the North District alone. It's not a bad idea to find some people. Also, as Villo said, if the other party has a way to restrain me, then Villo's role will be revealed. After White Yaksha finished speaking, everyone fell into deep thought. Especially Black Rabbit and Ren, their gazes towards Wu Ming were already filled with reverence. No matter where the strong were, they would be admired by others. Whether it was Wu Ming's intelligence that was comparable to or even surpassed 16 knights, his extremely powerful strength, the various treasures and items that he constantly took out, and the ability to freely travel between worlds, Ren and Black Rabbit already knew that Wu Ming was a very strong person based on these 4 aspects. Not to mention, White Yaksha had vaguely placed Wu Ming on the same level as her. Also, through the verbal exchange with White Yaksha, they could see that Wu Ming's strength was not weaker than White Yaksha's. As for being stronger than White Yaksha, the two of them did not dare to think about it. As expected, little brother, you and this kimono loli are both super strong. 16 knights laughed unrestrainedly. Why did 16 knights, who liked to fight against the strong, endure so many times? Because his instinct told him that whether it was White Yaksha or Wu Ming, they were not people he could match now. 16 Knights was not afraid of failure, but he liked to save the best dishes for last. Therefore, 16 Knights was not in a hurry to fight Wu Ming and White Yaksha. However, White Yaksha was slightly impatient. Enough idle chatter. Are you going to the Fire Dragon's birth ceremony in the North District? Give me an answer. White Yaksha folded the paper fan and slapped his thigh. Yes, of course. Why wouldn't I go? 16 Knights, an activist, immediately gave an answer. Mr. 16 Knights. Black Rabbit frowned and looked at 16 Knights. They were going to face the Demon King. Was it really okay to agree so hastily? Even if there were 2 strong people here, White Yaksha and Villo, they would not be able to answer so quickly. At this moment, Ren, who was beside Black Rabbit, shook his head at Black Rabbit. Forget it, Black Rabbit. Let's do as 16th Knight says. Even young Master Ren. Black Rabbit was shocked. After all, we are a community whose slogan is to defeat the Demon King. Besides, we have Villo, 16 Knights, and the others. I believe that nothing will happen. Ren looked excited. Moreover, the Fire Dragon birth ceremony is a ceremony jointly held by the North and East districts. There will definitely be many gift competitions with rich prizes. Now is the time for no name to develop. If we can win those gift competitions, we will be able to obtain a large number of gifts. This will be of great help to the development of the community. After hearing Ren's words, Wu Ming and 16 Knights couldn't help but glance at Ren twice. As the leader of the community, Ren was already starting to look like one. Indeed. Don't forget that for Flying Bird's gift to be effective, it needs a lot of gifts as support. Moreover, if we can find a high-level gift that is suitable for Flying Bird to use, then we can solve the problem of Flying Bird's gift. Letitia also mentioned the benefits of participating in the Fire Dragon birth ceremony. That's right. Taking advantage of this great ceremony, I must solve the problem of my gift. Jiyuan Flying Bird had an expression that said, "If I don't go to hell, who will?" Immediately after, Ren's face showed that he couldn't bear it and spoke again. Actually, I don't want anyone to be like our community and have their name, flag, and companions taken away. Therefore, in summary, please forgive me as the leader for being willful, Black Rabbit. Hearing Ren's heartfelt words, Black Rabbit's worried heart was relieved. Really, young Master Ren has also grown. Black Rabbit couldn't help but feel happy for the growth of the community leader. That's why, you rabbit. Suddenly, Wu Ming's voice came from behind Black Rabbit. Immediately after, the Black Rabbit felt its ears being grabbed by 2 hands. Why? How could a mere Black Rabbit win against Wu Ming? Wu Ming used a little force and Black Rabbit couldn't hold on. Woo! Black Rabbit let out a strange cry, but Wu Ming acted as if he didn't hear it and continued to ravage Black Rabbit's ears. Wu Ming's mouth didn't stay idle either as he ravaged Black Rabbit's ears while speaking. Although I'm now a spirit, my strength hasn't been weakened by much. Since I've already joined No Name, then you just need to work hard toward the goal you want to move forward, because, Wu Ming paused, then let go of the hands that were grabbing Black Rabbit's ears, which made Black Rabbit's expression relax slightly. Then, Wu Ming touched Black Rabbit's head while walking away. You have me behind you. An extremely plain sentence made No Name, including 16th Knight and the other 2, feel incomparably reliable. Then, White Yaksha smiled. In that case, you can go back. The Fire Dragon's birth ceremony will officially start in 3 days. However, White Yaksha's words made 16th Knight slightly unhappy. Then can't we go in advance, White Yaksha? 16th Knight showed a presumptuous look. Jiao Yuao and Hirai Hiroyuki were also slightly moved. I'm already looking forward to it. It shouldn't be a big deal to go in advance. This group of problematic children couldn't wait for 1 night, so how could they wait for another 3 days? This made White Yaksha feel a little helpless. They were indeed problematic children. All right then, I'll help you wait for a while and send you over directly. Then, White Yaksha put down his fan, spread out his palms, and clapped twice. At that moment, Wu Ming felt a slight fluctuation in space. Okay, we've arrived at the North District, White Yaksha said. Eh? We're here already? Black Rabbit was clearly stunned, clearly unable to react. Don't lie to us, White Yaksha. Jiao Yuao narrowed her eyes at White Yaksha, clearly suspicious of him. Although I don't think you're lying to us, you still can't be trusted. Hirai Hiroyuki nodded. White Yaksha wasn't angry, but smiled slightly. Let's just go out and take a look. White Yaksha picked up his folding fan and covered the lower half of his face. Then, everyone stood up and walked out. As soon as they walked out of What's shop, what greeted No Name's eyes was no longer the original East District, but a city with a different style from the East District. This is the North District, everyone, White Yaksha announced. Chapter 635. Mandela was injured. Although it wasn't serious, the fact that a mere No Name could injure Mandela from Salamandra was enough to make Mandela's subordinates, who were the so-called higher-ups, extremely surprised. No Name left in a hurry. Renhakuro Bunny had an apologetic and helpless expression as he pulled 16 Knights, Jiyoyuki, and Kasuga Hikari away in a hurry. Wu Ming and Letitia were left behind to deal with the trifles caused by the 3 problem children. The higher-ups of Salamandra were frightened by the fleeting strength of No Name. In addition, The decision was in the hands of Shadora and Mandela, so they didn't think about how to deal with this incident. Mandela was quite embarrassed because he felt the threat of death, so he wanted to severely punish No Name and the group of problem children who didn't respect etiquette and directly attacked. However, because Mandela's skills were inferior and he lost despite being on guard, Mandela was too embarrassed to be ruthless. However, the most important thing was still the leader of the Salamandra community, Shadora. Although Shadora was young, she was still the leader of Salamandra. Shadora was quite dissatisfied with Mandela's provocative words towards No Name before. In Shadora's opinion, this incident was completely instigated by her brother. Therefore, Shadora suppressed her brother and wasn't prepared to let No Name pay any compensation. Mandela naturally didn't agree, but after being glared at by his sister, he immediately compromised. However, Wuming, who was left behind to deal with the mess caused by the 3 problem children and clean up their mess, was a little embarrassed. After all, when 16 Knights and the others attacked Mandela, Shadora and the other members of Salamandra didn't react in time. Without Wuming, why would White Yaksha let them do as they pleased was another important reason. Therefore, Wuming used his ability to create high-grade items to help repair the wall and the damaged floor, tables, and chairs. After all, the creation of high-level props was not something like projection magic. Therefore, ordinary walls, tables, and chairs, the finished products created by silent sound would not disappear. Then, because of Mandela's injury, he left early. After Shadora and the higher-ups of Salamandra had a short discussion with Wuming, because she was worried about her brother's injury, Shadora ended the meeting. After all, when the 3 problem children attacked Mandela, the meeting had already collapsed. If it weren't for White Yaksha and Wuming's support, as well as Shadora's understanding, this would have turned into a war between Salamandra and No Name. Shadora said, "Feel free to do whatever you want in Salamandra." Then she left with the higher-ups of Salamandra. Then, when White Yaksha and Letitia were about to leave, Wuming called out. Wuming stopped him. "Wait, Vero." White Yaksha and Letitia were both White Yaksha and Letitia White Yaksha. Wuming, who sat down, looked at White Yaksha who was sitting leisurely on her chair. "What's wrong, White Yaksha? Is there anything else? I just want to tell you that although Mandela looks like a villain, he is very considerate of Shadora and Salamandra, so..." White Yaksha didn't finish, but Wuming understood what she meant. White Yaksha didn't expect Wuming to let go of his prejudices, but at the very least, he shouldn't delay dealing with the Demon King because of Mandela. After all, the Demon King was a disaster to the entire 54545 outer sect. Death was considered light. Although White Yaksha had previously said that the Demon King would soon be defeated by him, White Yaksha was still very worried. Even if Wuming and No Name were here, she was still worried. White Yaksha had a strong love for the people of the lower class, just like how she loved her own people. She didn't want anyone to be sacrificed. "Don't worry, I'm not that childish." Wuming laughed because of White Yaksha's words. "I will pay more attention to the people at this fire dragon's birth ceremony. I will definitely not let anything happen to them. You just wait for the Demon King to attack and deal with the Demon King, White Yaksha." Wuming smiled encouragingly, then stood up and walked toward the door. Letitia followed Wuming to the door. The moment Wuming went out, Letitia turned her head. "Master will definitely be fine, Lord White Yaksha." Letitia bowed slightly to White Yaksha, then left the room and closed the door. "Really, your confidence makes me feel a little hot-blooded," White Yaksha said as if she had a headache, but the curve of her mouth proved that she was calm at the moment. Wuming and Letitia quickly walked out of Salamandra's door. Then he realized that the rest of No Name were sitting in a small shop near Salamandra's base. Black Rabbit, who had been paying attention to Salamandra's door, smiled when she saw Wuming and Letitia come out. She waved at Wuming. The others also noticed Wuming and Letitia's figures. Without a doubt, they were waiting for Wuming. "Why are you waiting for me?" Wuming smiled helplessly and walked into the small shop. "After all, it's already very late. Everyone discussed that we should find a hotel together after you and Letitia come out," said Ren, who was the leader. "But it's basically impossible to find one. 16 Nights said casually as if he was trying to ruin the scene. Then he was fiercely glared at by Black Rabbit. However, 16 Nights ignored her and continued to do as he pleased. But 16 Nights is right. With such a lively festival, I'm afraid the hotel is already full. Letitia, who was standing behind Wu Ming, supported 16 Nights' words. As an old senior, Letitia knew a lot about how to deal with people. It wasn't strange that such a festival would cause the hotel to be full. However, this made Ren's expression difficult. Originally, they were brought here by White Yaksha to work together with Salamandra. In theory, they should have asked White Yaksha to make arrangements for them, or just stay in Salamandra. However, because of the impulsiveness of the 3 problem children, they were embarrassed to continue staying there. Really, Mr. 16 Nights, Miss Flying Bird, and Miss Yao, you are too impulsive. Black Rabbit, who had already taught the 3 problem children a lesson, spoke again and began to teach the 3 problem children a lesson. Yes. Sorry. Yeah. However, the 3 problem children did not take Black Rabbit's lesson to heart. The 3 of you. Black Rabbit was angry again. In order to prevent Black Rabbit from crying again because of the 3 problem children, Wu Ming made a suggestion. Then, let's go back to No Name to Stay. You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.